Alrighty, Dave. We are back. Gaming Wisconsinbly, episode
Hey.
8. We are covering all of the Metroidvanias now that we've covered all the classic Castlevania games.
Yeah.
Going on our long list here, but the Metroidvanias they're much less of, and they're much newer.
Yeah, no, we're not talking about the 3D Metroidvanias.
No, we're
Curse of
skipping-
Darkness and all that. But
Yeah, we're skipping the PS2 games, the Wii game, I think, unless you might have wanted to say something about it.
yeah, not particularly.
The Xbox 360 games, whatever else there's been, we're skipping all that stuff. We're going directly just into the 2D Metroidvania games, starting with what is probably the best one anyway.
Oh, yeah. No question.
Castlevania Symphony of the Night from PS1 from 1997. Dave, I know this is one of your favorite games of all time. Why don't you just take us away on this one? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I always thought the other name of it was pretty neat. The Japanese name is translated as Demon Castle Dracula X Nocturne in the Moonlight.
Oh, snap.
Yeah, it's like they even give it a badass name. But yeah, this is the biggest thing, perhaps the easiest thing early on, is that this is the best music I probably of any Castlevania game, at least for me.
Yes.
I think it's right up there with the best game soundtracks, period. This is one of the first, I think it was the first soundtrack that I ever bought on CD from a game. And
That sounds awesome. I didn't even know you could do that.
Yeah, I have it.
Huh.
I still have it at home. It's still one of my favorites. I have had that stuff on my phone or my music player or whatever forever.
Yeah.
This game is basically a direct sequel to Rondo of Blood, another amazing game that we just talked about and gushed about. It even recreates the final fight between Richter and Dracula as the first boss.
Yep.
And the neat thing about that probably a lot of people know by now, but when I first played, I didn't know how well you do in that fight has effects on what your starting stats and items and stuff are in the regular game. So you can end up with your stats being just slightly tweaked here and there, like slightly higher strength or int or whatever. But what's really interesting is you can do a luck mode, which cranks your luck up in the stratosphere and lowers all your other stats really low. And so it makes the game a little challenging early on, but it makes it much easier to get interesting items to drop. So that's probably the biggest thing to be aware of for that is triggering luck mode. Is highly recommended. Maybe not for your first playthrough, but it's highly recommended afterwards from me.
Okay.
I think it's fun. But the overall gameplay is great. The jumping controls are perfect. You have perfect control over what you're doing at any time. The additional relics that you get later let you do stuff like double jump, your gravity boots, where you can...
And that's kind of a reoccurring thing in all the
Yes.
Metroidvanias are these relics that you get that unlock basically more of the game.
Yeah, they unlock different platforming controls and stuff. So, like I said, this might be the first game where it had a double jump. I think this is the first game that had the gravity boots where you push like down, up, and then you jump all the way.
Space jump.
Yeah, you jump all the way to the ceiling.
Yeah.
And you can do your wolf and bat forms, which, the bat form they reused a fair amount, at least in the Soma games. The wolf form I don't know ever came back.
I don't think
really.
it ever did, and honestly I see no reason for it anyway.
Yeah, it was kind of neat, but it's not terribly necessary. This game has huge amounts of replay value. I'll sit down and play it any day of the week. I'll play the original PlayStation version. I'll play the Xbox 360 version. I'll play
your Saturn version, Dave?
Yeah, I need to. They've got some translated versions of that, and the big thing with that is the translation is useful because it's unless you can see everything, unless you can tell what item is what from sight from the icons, it's nice to be able to read. But more importantly, it fixes some of the slowdowns and stuff that are inherent to the Sega Saturn version.
I've never played the Saturn version, but I have the mode, so I should have just played it. But
yeah,
definitely. I got sitting down with the PS1, and I'm like, screw it.
The big thing is the Saturn doesn't have quite the memory to do it inherently, but they've hacked the game to use that 4 meg or 1 meg or 4 meg RAM card.
Yeah.
And that apparently improves the performance quite a bit. So I would definitely try that. I gotta give that a shot one of these days when I have time. But this added the reverse castle. So it's a huge game. There's all this stuff to do. You could explore and find interesting items and get the way through, and you can beat the game and then figure out, oh, you didn't actually beat the game. You got the bad ending.
And that's kind of also a common theme with a lot of the Metroidvanias. You can beat the game early.
Yes.
Get a shitty ending, and you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
And this game doesn't just have different endings, but it has a different ending that literally doubles the game.
Yeah.
Because you literally get a reverse castle. It's literally flipped upside down. And it's not just that they flipped it upside down and say, here, have fun. But actually some of the levels are like way harder flipped upside down. So they clearly were thinking about this when they designed the entire game.
I would say that's when the game actually kind of starts.
Yes.
Because, I mean, this is also a common theme with a lot of Metroidvanias, is the games start out pretty easy for the most part.
Yes.
Some are definitely harder, and we'll talk about, like, Circle of the Moon, for example, which is much harder. Yeah. But, like, yeah, Symphony of the Night, it starts out, I think this is the first time you ever use a sword.
Yes.
In Castlevania. You start out with Alucard, who's, you know, you could play him in Dracula, or, not Dracula, Castlevania 3 as a playable character.
Yep.
But in this time, he's finally the main protagonist.
Yep.
Instead of Richter, who's... What happens to him right away in that game?
So Richter beat Dracula in Rondo of Blood, and then he basically gets corrupted by the Dark Priest Shaft, who wants to bring Dracula back.
Yeah.
So a few years later. And it depends on which ending, but long story short, like the bad ending is Richter says, I want to bring Dracula back so I can fight him again and beat him again. And like, I just want to keep fighting him and beating him and fighting him and beating him like until the end of time or something. Because like, it's kind of that old thing, like, I've beaten Dracula, what do I do with my life now? Kind of thing. That whole shtick. Like, his mind's like corrupted, so that's what he's thinking. And so he's like temporarily like the lord of the castle until Dracula is brought back, kind of. So it's kind of neat. And so if you just straight up beat him, spoilers, you're just defeating, you're killing Richter basically, and then the castle goes away, and then you kind of won, but it's kind of a sad downer, right?
Yeah.
The correct ending is you're stopping Shaft from controlling Richter and freeing him and sending him off with Maria to do his thing, and then you deal with Daddy yourself, with Alucard's father, and it's got storyline built into the game. You know, like there's parts where there's that succubus boss where you find out stuff about Alucard's mom,
his past, and
yeah. And this has, you know, the storyline, the not animated really, but the audio, you know, back and forth. The Dracula's "What is a man" speech.
What is a man?
Yeah, it's got this. That was the biggest thing when I first played this game. Like, wow, this game is like a cartoon. You know, this game has, you know, much more drawn out storyline.
Yeah, it gets you super invested from the get-go.
Yes.
Like, I really enjoyed this game.
Yeah, it just, the sound is amazing. Like, it just every significant zone has a different soundtrack, and they're all pretty entertaining. They're just, you know, like symphonic quality stuff basically.
Yeah, the soundtrack, like, I don't think there's one bad soundtrack in the entire game.
No.
Like, it's just top notch the entire time through.
The mechanics, the attacking mechanics differ wildly from weapon to weapon. So, you know, you have little piddly swords that swing in front of you. You have daggers that stab really fast in front of you.
So let's take a step back. Like, what is a Metroidvania? I guess we should kind of like define what this is. So,
to me, it's exploration where you have to, you know, backtrack and explore around and unlock power-ups, you know, to be able to get to different areas. And it should have RPG elements, which, you know, usually leveling up and things like that, usually weapons and armor and different things, you know, not just one single
sometimes
attack.
New abilities in some of the other games.
Yeah, basically that kind of a combination of it ultimately comes from a mix of Castlevania and Metroid, specifically Super Metroid.
Yep.
So it's, you know, it's kind of the Castlevania play style, but in a Super Metroid type environment with some RPG elements thrown in.
More RPG than Metroid.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes.
It's almost like you took Samus and included her into an RPG world with less projectiles.
I think it's
really weird.
Yeah, I think a lot of Metroidvanias don't have a ton of RPG elements and still kind of sneak in, and that's fine, but I think they work better when they're a little more like a action RPG.
So do I.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the more that were like Circle of the Moon we'll get to is lacked the RPG elements. I think it struggled as a game. Yeah.
But the biggest thing, one of the biggest things early on for this game is all the weapons. You just have a huge variety of weapons. You know, you're not just stuck with one whip. You have a different variety of swords. Some of them, like I said, straight in front of you. Some of them you swing over your head. Some of them later on in the game do fancy things like being able to throw a weapon or being able to do a special combination, like a Hadoken motion, and it does, you know, special effects. You have like the shield rod that, depending on which shield you use it with, causes different effects.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like, see, I didn't know what like some of that stuff even did.
Yeah, like the shield rod, you do a Hadoken motion, and depending on which shield you have, it'll give you different buffs, or it'll make little Gradius shields appear in front of you. Huh. Or one of them, I think there's a not really a bug, but it's like It's kind of a secret. It does like this huge thing in front of you that does a ton of damage, and you can just destroy things. I think it's with one of the final shields in the game. I forget. I sometimes forget, because this is a lot of the stuff that's in this game you get in the Aria Sorrow, Dawn of Sorrow,
Right, yeah.
and so sometimes I confuse some of the things because they're so similar in so many ways. But this is the game that really starts just opening wide the floodgates of all these weird items, and a lot of them repeat from Metroidvania to Metroidvania. You see a lot of the same weapons over and over again, but with different variations.
Yeah.
In addition, you do get sub weapons still in this game. So it's basically the same sub weapons, but a few extras. You know, the book that rotates around you and stuff. But you have hearts for those, and you have a mana bar for spells. So you have stuff like Dark Metamorphosis.
See, and like I never use the spells in this game.
Oh, they're fun. So you have one that he throws back his cloak and shoots the fireballs out like he does in Castlevania 3.
Wow.
Yeah, that move is a spell, and it lets you teleport also like Dracula does.
Do you get all the spells from the librarian, or am I?
You technically can use them at the beginning of the game if you know what they are.
Oh, okay.
If you do the spell motion, it automatically pops up and shows up in your thing. But if you buy it from the librarian, then it tells you what the motion to do the spell is. So if you know what you're doing, you can unlock them all at the very beginning and then know what they are. But yeah, some of them I rarely used. Like the fireball thing is neat, but I didn't use it a lot.
Yeah,
I
don't really need any of it. But
Dark Metamorphosis is the best by far, because what that does is once you have it active, any blood that lands on your character heals you. And because you'll notice in the game when you kill enemies, they bleed usually all over the place. But most part, you just don't think about it. Oh, it's just an effect. But you use Dark Metamorphosis, you realize, oh, that will heal me. That's not just an effect. That actually heals you when it lands on you. And then you have a sword, the Miramasa, that powers up depending on how much blood you feed it.
Oh.
Now, you don't have to have Dark Metamorphosis going for that to work,
but
you can do both at the same time, and it makes it easier to grind through all the enemies to get that.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, so with each enemy you kill, they have a chance, depending on your luck stat, in order to drop an item.
Yep.
It's usually weapons, sometimes like food or whatever.
Yeah, lots of
status
consumables.
Things.
Yeah, lots of consumables.
And like one thing and this is kind of a common gripe that I have with a lot of the Metroidvanias is I mean, the percentage is so low, even if you do jack up your luck.
Yes.
That like unless you really want to grind heavily in these games and spend hours upon hours of doing it, it's almost like easier just to skip these optional items,
which is fine. I mean, almost none of them. I think none of them are actually necessary in any way, shape, or form. A lot of them are really fun.
Yeah.
I always like to play this game now on luck mode. Like I said, you beat the first boss a certain way, it cranks your luck stat way up. It makes the early game much harder, which I think is fine because it's super easy otherwise.
Yeah.
And you get that, and then you add in all the luck items. I tend to play through most of the game with as many luck items equipped as possible, which again makes the game a little harder because your other stats aren't as good. There's a set of items called the Alucard items.
Right, yeah.
So again, you start the game, you have all the Alucard items. Those are like his personal items. Then you meet Death, and he takes all your stuff away and says, "Haha," and then leaves you with just nothing. And you have to get a janky basic
crappy sword and crappy knife.
And you can find your items later in the castle, and then you're like, oh, now I'm badass again, like it was at the beginning of the game, which is neat. That's one of the first games, I think, where they do that well, where you're badass and then have to get back to badass. But at some certain point in the game, you find the a la carte items, and you think, oh, this is my stuff again. But then you try it out, and you're like, well, this isn't my stuff. This is kind of janky and weird. But if you equip all of them, it cranks your luck way up.
Right.
And it's kind of a joke, of course. A la carte is a weird, it sounds like a la carte, but it actually means something completely different. It's a la carte. I forget what that's at. It's a food term, right? For or you're ordering food a certain way. I forget what it actually translates to, but it's a pun on his name basically. And so I tend to have all the luck things in place at all times for most of the game, and then it gives you a fair amount more drops, which I think is more fun.
The last time I tried playing that through Symphony of the Night was a couple months ago when we did all this stuff. Mm-hmm. I did have the a la carte set equipped, like basically as early as you could find it.
Yes.
Dude, I was not getting any drops at all, and I was trying to spend, like 10 minutes here and there grinding. I'm just like, you know what? I don't need these drops.
No.
Like, it does help. Some of the drops, like, I remember the first time I played through, I got the, what are they called? The cestus? Like, the throwing discs
the discus.
or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had 2 of those. So,
those
I was just cruising through the game.
Those are awesome.
It was super easy, but, like, I tried grinding for some of that this time through with the a la carte set and all the other luck boosting items. I just wasn't getting the drops, and I'm like, you know what?
Oh, the Chakram, that's what they're called.
Chakram, that's what it was. Yes.
Yeah, I think the luck mode and the a la carte together works pretty well.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I didn't know luck mode was even a thing.
Just the one or the other isn't that great. But yeah, that's another great thing about this game is there's so many unique weapons. There's the Muramasa I mentioned. There's the sword familiar. So you have 6 familiars in the game where you can equip one of the 6, and it's just this little monster that follows you around. Like the imp will like hit switches for you.
You kind of need the imp at some point.
You kind of need the imp briefly. The fairy will give you healing items when you're wounded or when you're like paralyzed or poisoned or whatever. That's kind of neat. The sword familiar just follows you around, and when it gets higher level, it starts attacking enemies, and it does a little. He yells out "slice" and he spins around. If you max his level, you can use him as an equipable sword.
Oh no shit!
Yeah, and he's one of the best weapons in the game.
Huh.
If you crank him if you max him out to level 99. Which isn't super hard, but it takes...
How do you even level those guys up? Like, I have no idea.
You level them up while you fight enemies while you have them equipped.
Okay, because, like, that's even more grindy, because, like,
Yes.
I always just had the imp or something, and it's like...
Yeah.
After a while, it's just useless.
Technically, you can grind out all 6 of them. Realistically, I usually pick one, and I crank them all the way up. And they add a little bit of damage. You know, it doesn't hurt anything to have them out. It doesn't eat up any mana or anything. They're just out.
You don't even notice them after a while, usually.
Yeah, but they help out a little bit. The sword, I think, is usually by far the best. But the only other thing then is if you use them as a weapon, then you're not using them as a familiar, so then you might want a second familiar. So that's a whole new rabbit hole. But anyway, it's neat. I think one of the other ones might affect some of your spells and stuff. They all have interesting special effects. But so you have the sword familiar you can use as a sword. You have the chakrams, which is a thrown weapon, and you can use 2 of them.
Yep.
So normally you use a weapon and a shield, but you can technically use 2 weapons, but in most cases it's not helpful because you can't really attack any faster.
In some of the later Metroidvanias, 2 weapons are pretty much needed.
Right. In this one, I think the only one that's super useful is the chakrams and the rune sword. So the rune sword is kind of like the chakrams. It's a one-handed sword that you kind of throw in front of you.
Oh,
and
yeah,
it makes
I remember
this neat
that one.
arc.
Yeah.
And so I would usually get the dual chakrams, and then later I would get dual rune swords.
Yeah,
and you're just like you're just swinging them left, right in front of you. Then you get the Vorpal sword, Vorpal blade, which is a one-handed sword that you can swing while you're running with a decent arc in front of you.
Okay.
So you don't even stop to attack. You're just constantly swinging while you're going. And then the Chrysogrim is the other one people are familiar with, is the upgraded Vorpal blade, which has a huge effect, and you can swing while you're running.
Okay.
So there's so many good weapons. And then the shield rod I mentioned, and the Mablung sword. Oh, here we go. Those you can use them with the Alucard shield. And that turns it into it turns the Alucard shield into a weapon with a 255 attack power.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so you basically just hold your shield out and kill things.
Huh.
While you use it. There's so many goofy, crazy, overpowered things in this game. It's neat.
Now, I always play these games like very casually.
Yes.
Where like I don't look up a guide for like anything that I'm playing unless I get stuck.
Yeah.
And I just need to know where to go.
Yeah.
So like a lot of this stuff I never knew. Like because if you just play the game casually, the one gripe I guess I do have about it is like the items themselves are kind of cryptic. Like the game doesn't really say what they do.
Yes.
Like even some of the spells that you get don't really say what they do either. And it's like, okay, like in order to get through the game, really, like you don't need anything.
You hardly need
anything. You just need like equipment that you can buy in the shops.
Yep.
You need obviously the or the upgrades in order to get to different ledges and shit just to progress.
Yeah.
But like the last time I played it, I just like whatever. This is the best thing I found in a chest.
Yep.
And like I had 0 problems. Now, one question I do have: does this game have any sort of hard mode or no?
Well, like I said, the luck mode is kind of a hard mode. It has Richter mode, where you play as Richter.
Oh, right, yeah.
And that's harder in some ways because you don't get all the better weapons and stuff. You're just using...
But there's no, like, blanketly hard mode.
I don't think so. There might be, and I'm forgetting it. There are a bunch of different modes in this game, and I don't remember if I ever explicitly looked for a hard mode.
Yeah, because that's what I would, like, love with this game, because, like, it is very easy until you reach the reverse castle.
Yeah,
and then it gets quite a bit harder from there. But I
thought there was a new game plus that was harder, where you start with certain stuff, but the game is harder. I mean, it's been a while since I played through it, but I thought there was a new game plus.
Yeah, I'll have to look for that because the last couple times I played it, it's like it's super easy up to a point.
Yeah.
But like, I would like to be forced to kind of
Yeah.
get these better items.
Definitely start with luck mode. Like I said, it definitely makes the early game a lot more tricky. It makes the first couple bosses very hard. And
Yeah, the bosses are
Yeah.
one thing about this game too. Like, the bosses don't last more than 5 seconds for the most part.
Yeah, and it's a shame because some of them are really awesome. Like you have that one boss that's just literally a big sphere full of bodies.
It looks great.
And you have to like carve your way through the bodies to get to the core in the middle.
Yeah,
of
it
the
looks
thing.
so awesome, but it's
shooting
just,
lasers at you and stuff.
it's almost like such a trivial boss fight that like doesn't really matter. Now that's one of the longer bosses.
Yes.
Like earlier in the game, like bosses will appear and they'll be dead within 5 seconds, even with just like your standard items.
Yeah, and then in the reverse castle, it's kind of a wake up call because if you're not careful, you do I think the first boss in the reverse castle is the fly Beelzebub, the guy with all the flies.
Yeah,
and he just destroys you if you're not careful because all of a sudden like oh shit just got real, and he's not necessarily a hard boss either, but you have to pay attention. You can't just ignore the hits.
Yeah, you can't just like tank everything.
Yeah. But there's some, again, this game has the wolf form, the bat form, the mist form. Which can be sometimes it can be fun in combat. Like the wolf form, you can actually upgrade to where you can fight with it, and you can like dash through enemies. It's kind of like the dash in Metroid.
Yeah, the wolf form, I don't know. Like I never found a use for it, so I never really used it.
Again, it has the familiars. It has a librarian, which lets you buy and sell items.
The only thing I don't like about the librarian is it's so far out of the way.
Yeah, it takes a while before you get to him, and by the time you get to him, some of his stuff isn't super useful.
Yeah, you don't really need him. Yeah, I mean, you can always use the librarian cards in order to teleport to him, but then still, just to get out of his area takes a while too. So
yeah, he's not super convenient, but there's a neat thing. I don't know if you're familiar with the place where you can get the special items from him. So
no.
he sits on this chair, and there's a part underneath him where there's a gap underneath his chair.
Yeah.
And so you do the gravity boots jump underneath him, and it bounces him up in the air, and you have to keep doing it without landing.
Oh.
And if you do that jump, like I think it's like 50 times in a row or a dozen times or whatever it is, you keep doing it, and he starts dropping items.
Really?
Yeah, he starts dropping special items that you can only get there. One of which is a set of armor you wear that turns you into an Axe Knight.
Oh.
Like it gives you the actual sprite of an Axe Knight, and you attack like an Axe Knight does.
Huh.
This game is so wild. That's the best thing for me is it's a playground. There's just
it almost sounds like a Nintendo Power thing for a PlayStation game. Like
yes.
Like, yeah,
yes.
That would be so much fun to go read like a real guide about this.
Yeah, getting through the game is almost kind of beside the point. Being able to play around with all the fun stuff is mostly the point. There's so many weird, wacky, crazy, fun weapons.
I'm assuming there was a strategy guide for this game. Like, I've never seen one, but...
I don't remember. I seem to recall when I first played it, I think it was early enough in the stage of the internet that I can't remember if GameFAQs was out yet or if there was just I'm pretty sure there was some kind of...
This is 97. That should be GameFAQs era.
Yeah, I thought I remember one of the first times playing it starting to look up things on GameFAQs and starting to find things that way. I know I never had a book for it, but I could have sworn I found some kind of website or something that started to talk about. People were starting to figure out and post stuff online.
Yeah, because a lot of that stuff, like, how would you ever know?
Yeah, this wasn't a Nintendo Power era. It was well past that, of course. But yeah, I want to say this was super early internet era as far as, finding video game stuff on the, tricks and tips and stuff on the internet.
Sure.
But like I said, the overall layout of the castle is kind of neat because there's all these different areas and you can kind of pick your order of play to some extent. There are things that you can sequence break a little bit if you know what you're doing. There's some jumps that are, if you make your jump just perfectly, you don't need the item,
Yeah.
And there's some warp rooms to save time getting around the map. I think it might have been one of the first games that had that. There's plenty of false walls and floors you can break through for items. Most of which you can tell are there because you can look at the map and see, there's a gap here.
Yeah, there's a little black box right here.
Yeah, so there's got to be something here. So you could play the game as Richter. If you play the Saturn game, you can also play as Maria.
Oh, okay.
Which it only existed in the Saturn version. There's also some additional content that only exists in the Saturn, like some weapons and stuff, weapons and items. That's again after you beat it once. Both modes, Richter or Maria, are more of a traditional Castlevania. So in that way, it really is more of a sequel to Rondo. You can play it as kind of a Rondo sequel then.
Sure.
Which is neat. I think I really enjoy. I actually enjoy that quite a bit too, especially more I like Rondo.
Yeah, like they are fun. They offer like the classic Castlevania experience to Metroidvania game. So
yeah, and like I said, there are multiple endings. Fighting Dracula the right way, you have to have certain items equipped, and you have to pay attention to what people are telling you and stuff. And it's neat.
Yeah.
I really have nothing to complain about the game at all. I think it's basically a perfect game. I play it again all the time. I have nothing to complain about. I guess maybe that it's a little easy.
Yeah, I could only complain about the difficulty. And is that so much of a complaint? I don't know. Like, it's not like it's Barney, but
no, and
it gets harder.
It does get harder. The difficulty maybe doesn't scale as evenly as it should.
Yeah,
like you think the game is over, and then you realize, oh, okay, now it starts to get hard.
And I can definitely complain that the item drop rates are very low. And this is honestly, it's not even a complaint about Symphony of the Night.
Yeah.
It's a complaint about every single Metroidvania game except for maybe Harmony of Dissonance.
Yeah.
Where for some reason in that particular game they jacked up the item drop rate for some reason.
Yeah.
But I wish it was a little bit easier to grind out some of the cool items and stuff to, kind of be able to enjoy the game a little bit more. Like, there's only so much grinding I want to do at my age nowadays, but
yeah.
I mean, I could definitely see it's for other people, so.
But yeah, if you haven't played this again, what's wrong with you? I mean,
it is excellent. Yeah. It's one of the best PS1 games ever made. It's one of the best. It's maybe the best Castlevania game ever made, at least Metroidvania wise.
Yeah, I get it. To some people, this is where Castlevania started going wrong. They like the classic Castlevanias. I think you can like both.
I think they kind of tapped out what they could do with the classics.
I mean,
once you're done with Rondo, it's like, what else is left?
Yeah. I can understand people being annoyed that because of Symphony of the Night, they stopped trying to make an upgrade to Rondo or whatever.
Sure, but they always included at the end of every Metroidvania, they give you a Julius mode or a Richter mode or whatever. Like, you can play your classic if you want to.
So yeah, I guess the worst thing you might be able to say is if you're not a Metroidvania fan, you might have to play through a Metroidvania to get your classic Castlevania mode. Maybe they should have made it selectable from the beginning.
Sure, whatever.
For people that are Scrooge for Metroidvanias, I guess.
But yeah, as far as Metroidvania go, I don't think there's any that I despise. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know anyone that doesn't really like them at all.
Yeah, so one of my favorite games might just be my favorite game. It's hard to say, but it's up there.
Yeah, it's an easy 5-star game for me. I don't know, play it. There are some gripes I have about it, but the game is so fun, you don't really care, and you can skip all the optional shit and still enjoy it.
Yeah, play it whatever way you want. Play it legitimately. Screw around and get every item to drop in the game. Unlock. It's got a mode where it shows you. Unfortunately, you have to go to the librarian where it shows you all the enemies in the game and what they drop.
Oh right, yeah.
And so you can completely open up that entire thing. Every enemy, every drop, blah blah blah. I don't think you get anything special, but you can.
Who knows?
It's neat. Later games will put that in the menu, which makes way more sense. Yeah. So there are things that they figured out and improved slightly, but they're all kind of nitpicky things.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely go out of your way to play it. Symphony of the Night, solid 5-star game.
Great game. So yeah, that came out in 97. We had a bit of a gap.
Yeah, quite a bit actually.
Next one is in 2001. And the Game Boy Advance, which is Castlevania Circle of the Moon.
So this is one of those games that I kind of forgot even existed.
Yeah.
It's one of those I don't know, kind of dark horse games or whatever that it just kind of came out and it's still cheap and no one seems to give a crap that it exists.
Yeah.
But this is a very large step back for me as far as Metroidvanias go.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can tell that it's the first title that came out after Symphony of the Night because they were definitely trying to evoke some parts of it, but they hadn't really figured out the GBA very well, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is a oh boy, where do you even start with this thing?
The music, I think, is where you start. So I
don't remember any of it.
It's got some catchy tunes, but they had not figured out the Game Boy audio hardware very well. The music sounds very tinny. It sounds very. I think this might be one of the few ones where I hesitate to put the music on my phone and listen to it just because. I think in some cases you can play the same music on other, non-Game Boy hardware and it sounds better, but it was designed to try and make the best of it and it didn't do a great job. And it, even on a phone or something else, I don't think it sounds great.
Do you know who the main protagonist of this game was again? Did you write any of that stuff down?
Yeah, this is Nathan Graves, who is
oh, that's right. Okay.
He's a descendant of the Belmonts, but he's not a Belmont. And he uses the Hunter's Whip, which is either the Vampire Killer Whip renamed or it's a different whip. He plays similar to him, but it's kind of funny because some of the later games they make it a point where only Belmonts can use the vampire killer. Anyone else, they can't use the full power. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So it's not really clear if this is just an unpowered vampire killer that he's using, or if he's using a completely separate whip.
And from what I remember, the beginning of the game starts. You're basically just part of a party to go hunt down Dracula.
Yep.
He wrecks the party, or whoever, like your dad or something.
Well, so Camilla is there. She's trying to bring back Dracula.
That's right. Yeah.
And she's trying. And she basically sends you and your co-vampire hunter down a pit where and keeps the your master there basically to use as a sacrifice for Dracula essentially.
That's right.
And so you're going with you have the rival character who's
he's
the
just
son.
like a dick for almost no reason.
Well, he's a dick because his father, your master, gave you the whip instead of him. And so he's pissed off, and I didn't write down his name. And
who cares?
Yeah,
he sucks.
There's a hack version of the game where you can play as him, which is kind of neat.
Okay.
I think there might have been a hack version of one of the Dawn of Sorrow games too, where you can play as him. So like a lot of people kind of like him. He's kind of a dark horse character. But yeah, you occasionally throughout the game, he shows up and just kind of says, "Oh, stop following me. I'll deal with this." You know,
you beat the
leave me
boss
alone.
that he's struggling with, and he gets all pissy.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm not. It's not my favorite thing, but it's a storyline. You know, it's something.
Thing. Like
okay, it's Hugh Baldwin. So
Hugh.
Morris Baldwin is the master, and then his son Hugh Baldwin is the rival character.
Okay.
And this is one. Morris Baldwin, like I said, he's a veteran vampire hunter. This is in what is it in the 1930s or 1830s. I don't remember if he exists anywhere else. I think he was made up purely for this game. This whole game is a little bit out of continuity almost. Like it is in continuity, but it doesn't really attach to much of anything else.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll say about this. So the gameplay is a major step backwards in the fact that you don't get weapons this time. You just get your whip.
You have your whip.
You can move it in some directions if you hold on the attack button.
Yep.
Instead of finding new weapons or equipment or buying anything, the enemies do drop a bunch of items, which is just armor and health refill for the most part.
And the cards later.
And cards. And yeah, basically your entire attack system is revolved around these cards. There's, I think, 18 of them maybe in the game or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, overall the game kind of plays like... it almost plays like a cross between regular Castlevania games and Richter mode in Symphony of the Night.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get these cards and you can combine them together to unlock new abilities or power-ups or stat increases or whatever.
Yeah.
The problem is that you don't know which enemies drop which cards.
Yeah.
So unless you sit there and you grind every single enemy for whatever amounts of drops that they have, you don't really know. Yeah. And even the cards, when you do combine them, they don't always say what they do. And some of the cards have a special like combo button that you have to press while the two cards are combined in order to unlock whatever their abilities are.
Yeah.
So if you go into the game blind, not knowing this, you'll think that the cards are completely worthless.
Yeah, because it literally, you equip a combination of cards, and for each combination of cards, it'll either tell you what it does once you've used it, or it'll just say basically nothing.
Yeah.
And then some of them you have to do a certain button combination. Some like might give you resistance to a certain kind of damage, so you have to take damage for it to show you that that's what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in all cases, once you've activated them and used them properly, it'll tell you what it does.
It will.
But you have to figure that out first.
And it's like very random. Because sometimes you have to equip two cards and then do like a certain button combo press in order to unlock their ability.
Well, there are some patterns, like Mercury powered up with, or Mercury combined with anything is going to power up your whip. And so Salamander will be a fire whip, and
I'm thinking of like the Thunderbird one.
Yeah, some of the later ones are a little more confusing.
Yeah, it's like, dude, I had no idea. I had to look this stuff up online because I'm like, it's not in the game. Maybe it's in the manual, which I don't have. I don't know, but...
And there's kind of a whole system of elements and elemental protection. So like every enemy in the game may have a certain elemental resistances and certain elements that it does.
Yeah.
And so you can either use certain elements to do more damage against enemies. Some enemies are immune to certain elements. Or you can use protections to make you take little or no damage from some elements, which is interesting.
Like, what I don't like is that I made it probably 70% through the game without using any of the cards at any given point. Because I just didn't know what they did.
Well, and they're random drops from certain enemies, and some of them are ridiculously rare. This is one of the worst games for way too rare drops. And some of them are almost like necessary to beat the game in some ways. And you have to know that you need them, you know?
Yeah, I was struggling mightily.
Yes.
And like, this is kind of a thing with this game too, is most of the boss fights are super hard.
Yes.
Where like the only way that I found to beat most of them was to grind out hearts.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately, so this is like a big shitty part of this game.
Oh yes.
Is that one, the save rooms are so far and out of the way.
Yep.
But when you do save, it does not refill your hearts.
Yes.
Your hearts are your ammo for your sub-weapons.
Yes.
So what you have to do is find a candle that has like a 5 heart drop.
Yes.
Grind it. Save.
Yep.
Go to a boss.
Yep.
Cheese them with like the cross, for example.
Yep.
And then rinse and repeat.
Yep.
And without the cross, for a lot of these bosses, I found them like damn near impossible.
Yeah, I mean, some of the, like I said, some of the cards only drop from a certain enemy in a certain room. And so sometimes you have to, it's not even that just a certain enemy, like you have to stop at this particular area and just grind this particular specific room over and over until you get something. And sometimes you have to figure out, you have to search in a room you've already cleared and you have to go back. Sometimes enemies show up in rooms you've already cleared later in the game after you've beaten a boss.
Oh, right.
It'll pop back up in some room you used to. So you have to just know to go and check these old rooms sometimes where certain things used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, some of the later combos are kind of unique. Like someone will give you like an overhead sword slash with different elements. There's one that halves damage, but it makes you knocked back by all attacks, which is kind of neat. There's one which heals you while you stand still, which is useful but tedious.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, I switched between those two, and I was able to get to sequence break and get to Camilla before getting this item that you're supposed to get.
Oh.
And it made it ridiculously hard, but I was able to do it. So I appreciate that it at least lets you sequence break. It makes it very sandboxy, but it's weird.
Yeah, there's a few things I absolutely hated about this game. One, the backtracking.
Yeah, it's too much.
Way too much. It takes forever. And most of the time it's just so you can go get like 5 additional HP. Like a little upgrade that gives you a little bit of HP.
And I don't know if I wrote it down properly. I don't recall this game actually having warp rooms. Or if it did, they just weren't.
It does have warp rooms, but they're so.
They were really far. They were really far apart. That's
they never get you to where you want to go. Like, the save rooms and warp rooms are just so ridiculously not useful.
The other thing this game annoyed me with was the jump. So this is on a little GBA screen.
Yeah, and
you jump by default, like the whole height of the screen.
Yep.
And you start in an area with a vertical thing, and it makes it's disorienting. It like scrolls the screen really quickly up and down. And it was almost making me a little ill at first, as quickly as it was shifting the screen.
Sure,
it's weird. It's just a lot of little things like that it just figured out. They hadn't really figured out yet. They hadn't tweaked enough.
Speaking of not figuring out, this is the only Metroidvania that I know. I didn't play Portrait of Ruin, so maybe it's in there. But the only one that I know that you have like a run.
Yeah,
you double tap left or right to run.
You have a slide and an auto run. I actually like the auto run.
It was kind of neat.
I kind of missed it in later games.
Yeah. You always have to left or right, like the shoulder button dashes, which I never use, but
yeah, those. I mean, some games I actually started using them more, and you should. This game, of course, the problem is the reason I liked it is because it made it easier to get from area to area without having to hold down. A lot of these games you end up dash to try and. This game it just let you hold down run all the time, but again, the game was so big you had to.
It takes forever to get anywhere.
Yeah. But let me see. Like I said, I'm okay with the whip in this game, even though it's kind of disappointing after playing Symphony Night and having all these different weapons.
Yeah, you get the world to you, and then they bring you back down to like an original Castlevania, and it's just kind of like,
At least you get some card combinations that are like different kinds of swords and stuff, but they mostly all cost mana, and it's just kind of annoying.
It is. One other thing I despise is that there's no shop in this game.
Yes. Oh, I hate that.
So one, you get tons of like armor drops, so you have like 10 armors, no way to get rid of them.
Yep.
But also there's no way to buy food.
Yes.
Which
you just have to grind stuff.
Desperately need food for those later boss fights.
Yep.
But like, there's no way to get it unless you know which enemies drop which food, and then you just grind the. Grinding enemies in this game takes forever.
Yeah, and you have the sub weapons, And there's no item crash by default, except if you get a card combination much later in the game, then there's an item crash, which is kind of neat. But again, you don't want to use the weapons hardly at all because they're mostly just for bosses, because you have to refill your hearts, and it doesn't feel like they give you enough hearts in this game.
Oh no, you have to grind hearts like for a minute.
Yeah, and again, not getting your hearts maxed out when you're in a save room is just criminal. Why?
Yeah, I don't understand
why on earth would you do that? The equipment is kind of limited. You only have 3 slots. You know, you have basically your armor and like 2 accessory slots, I believe.
Yeah.
And there's like luck rings and things you can use to boost your luck, but it's not enough. You do get some movement upgrades. You get dashing, double jump. You get a tackle that you use to break rocks. You get a wall jump, kick boots wall jump. The heavy ring lets you push crates. The rock wing lets you do that high jump, which your jump is already really high. But
I just felt like all this stuff is just to make you go backtrack.
Yeah, it felt less fun than in some of the other Metroidvanias.
Yeah, it's just so far out of the way. Like, I don't know. Like, I remember this one just being a slog for me.
Yeah.
Pretty much most of the way through.
A lot of the castle seems very samey. Like, Symphony of the Night, some people complain maybe that you'll step from one area to the other and it's completely different.
Sure. Yeah.
But I actually prefer that. This game, a lot of it's all just kind of samey caverns.
It looks like you're in just a dirty tunnel.
Yeah, a lot of it is that way. The game doesn't hold your hand at all.
No.
I don't think games need to entirely hold your hand, but in this game, for example, this is one where you have to use frozen enemies as platforms to get to a certain area.
I didn't even realize that until I got like the space jump where I didn't need it anymore.
Well, and that's the thing. There are 2 different ways, either the ice card or the stone card, that lets you use enemies as platforms, which assumes you have gotten either or both of those cards, and it assumes that you've tried it on enemies, because a lot of times you would just ignore that kind of power, and that you've tried stepping on the enemy after you've done it, which maybe that's super obvious and I should have figured it out, but I was struggling at one point because there was a certain part you can't easily get to without that. Yeah. I'm sure there's a way around it that I just hadn't figured out, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I again, like, I got through 70 to 80% of this game before I even realized that certain things were the way they were.
Yes.
Like, it's not like I want to go back and play it to, like, do it the right way anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the amount of sequence breaking and sandboxiness this game has, but it just was so big and it took so long to get around, and there's way too much backtracking. Like, I felt like Symphony, it had similar backtracking, but it didn't feel as tedious to go around from area to area.
Yeah.
This game felt pretty tedious that way.
Yeah, I'd fully recommend skipping. I don't know about you.
Well, there is one other thing we didn't talk about is the character class system, which kind of adds some replay value to the game. So you start off as the vampire killer class, and you may not have noticed that, but if you open up the thing, it says you're a vampire killer.
Okay.
And you just assume, okay, I'm a vampire killer, whatever. But later on, you unlock a thief class. I think when you beat the game, you unlock the thief class, which hugely boosts your luck. A magician class, which is physically weak but magically strong, a warrior class, which lacks magic entirely but dishes out massive physical damage, and even a class that is really good with sub-weapons and has like a homing dagger move and stuff. And those are all different ways you can start the game.
Oh.
Yeah, so there's like all these different character classes.
Why didn't they just include that in the original? Like,
it's one of those things where you beat the game and it says, okay, now try as this character class.
Oh, okay.
But again, you have to redo the whole game. So apparently some of these classes are kind of fun, but yeah, it would have been nice to be able to pick your class.
Yeah, that actually sounds cool, but not cool enough to restart the game.
Yeah, I mean, the enemies and the background, some of the other stuff is okay. Like I said, some of the zones are kind of boring. It's unfortunate you don't get a lot from defeating bosses. Like, you don't even get an orb that drops after you kill enemies, which is weird.
Well, yeah, sometimes you actually beat a boss, but you're so injured that you can die just trying to save the game.
Yeah, like you beat the boss and you feel like you get nothing. Like usually that means there's an upgrade in the next room.
Well, usually you get like the next relic to get you to the next point in the game.
But again, you don't get anything from the boss. The boss is just an obstacle. It feels better when you at least get like a life max thing that drops from them. Why not? So, I mean, it's an okay game, but it needs some polish.
Yeah, being released 4 years after Symphony, it's kind of a disaster. But
yeah, I mean, I gave it a 4-star. I could almost see going lower than that. I dumped it. I bumped it down for sound quality and for the lack of polish. I could almost see doing 3.5, but
I did a 3. Yeah. I did not enjoy this game that much. I mean, there's some cool stuff to it, but this is one of those games that I compare to like all the other Metroidvania games, and it's the game I'd like to least revisit.
I wouldn't say it's my least favorite, but it has some problems.
Which one did you like less? I'm just curious.
I have more tolerance, I think, for grindiness, and so if you have little tolerance for grindiness, I could see rating this one much, much worse. This one I rated about the same as Ecclesia, which I think Ecclesia is slightly worse than this, but they're both pretty similar to me.
I do not agree. I mean, Ecclesia, I do not have high on my list. It's probably my second lowest, but like, I think it's a huge jump over Circle of the Moon.
I mean, it's on better hardware and all that. I mean, I think this game suffers a lot because it's an early GBA game. I think that's a lot of its problem. So I maybe give it a little more credit than I should. I should probably give it a 3.5, but it's still I mean, to me, like even a bad Metroidvania, and this isn't even really a bad one, but it's not that bad to me.
Well, it's still playable. It still makes you want to play to the end, but like this one to me got to be a slog, and I'm like, oh my god, I just want to be done with it.
This game didn't reach anywhere near to me the level of some of the classic Castlevania games that I didn't want to play. I still wanted to finish this game.
Well, sure. I mean, Metroidvanias for the most part are pretty enjoyable.
Yeah. So it's definitely, I would say it's the worst or one of the worst Metroidvanias. I wouldn't argue with you there.
Well, we'll get to Ecclesia and we'll see what you think about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, 3-star for me.
Yep. I'm okay with 4-star, but you could talk me down to 3.5, I guess.
I don't need to talk you down. It's fine. It's fine.
Next one up then is Harmony of Dissonance. Also on the Game Boy Advance. That one came out in 2002.
Yep. So yeah, this one, you kind of go back to the Symphony of the Night style a little bit, but it's like a mix between Circle of the Moon and Symphony.
Yeah.
Where it's like you still have... Now, this is one where you just used your whip the whole time again, right? Am I mistaken?
Yes.
It's been a hot minute since I played this.
This one, you start out with a standard whip, but you get a slot to upgrade it with different elemental stones and tips and things.
And spell books.
Yes.
Yeah, so this one, it goes back to the whip, so it's kind of like Circle of the Moon. But you upgrade, instead of the cards, it has spell books, which I didn't find all the spell books in my playthrough. I don't know if you did, but...
I thought I did. I mean, this game I enjoyed a lot more, so
so did I.
I did not mind trying to get all the... It wasn't so tedious to get all the stuff.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to the Symphony of the Night... Actually, yeah, no, it goes back to Symphony of the Night, where you find your sub-weapons in candles.
Yes.
And there's a whole slew of sub-weapons. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you have your standard ones, and you also have, like, a fist.
Yeah, the Sacred Fist.
Yeah, so, like, there's some cool stuff. All of them are basically OP, except for the knife.
And it's not such a hassle to refill your hearts.
No, refilling your hearts is pretty easy.
And you combine them with the spell book to get different effects. So that's actually really fun, because there's different weapon plus book combos that are really overpowered in certain areas, and there's so many combinations. There's like 30 different combinations.
There's a ton, but like what I found like one that was just OP, and that's basically what I stayed with for the entire game.
But I kept I agree with that, but then at a certain point I would find a new one that I was like, oh, now I have a couple overpowered options that I could switch between.
There are the one that I really liked. I don't know about you, but I think it was the book mixed with the wind, where it created that giant circle of books around you.
Yeah, that one I really liked. There's a ton of cross combos that are always good.
The cross is really good.
And again, the weapon plus book things use MP instead of hearts. So it's like you have hearts for your normal attacks, and then your MP is kind of your boss killer mostly, or if you're fighting really tough enemies.
Well, right, like the bosses just melt. Yeah. Because you can use an entire inventory of hearts and, the spell books with MP to just burst them right down. So
going back a little bit, I will say again, the sound effects on this one, they completely fixed the problems from the previous game.
And the game actually kind of looks like Symphony in a way. They give you the nice like ghosting effect on your character. And
some people complain about this one because they did this game I think was in the era, like in the first one I think they complained that it was maybe hard to see because it was those non-backlit screens. So they did the bright outline, which some people don't like, especially on later hardware that does have a backlit.
Yeah.
It's fine. There are hacks that gets rid of that line if it bothers you.
I would say the line is always there. I think you can turn off the shadow effects though.
Well, maybe. I'm just talking about the bright outline around your character.
It looks kind of goofy.
Some people really hate that, and there are hacks, like I said, to turn it off if it bothers you. But yeah, the sound effects made way better use of the game's hardware, so it wasn't purely just the GBA bad audio hardware. It was clearly, the previous game was clearly the fault of the programmers not understanding it well enough, or the audio people.
And this goes back to the same thing as Curse of the Moon, where instead of finding, well, in this one you do find a lot of items, which you don't in Curse of the Moon, but you also find health and MP maxes all over the map. and there's just like a million of them to collect.
Yep. I feel like this game has a much creepier, cooler mood to it.
Yeah.
The map system, the overall areas of the castle feel more colorful and more distinct. Again, more like Symphony of the Night.
Yep.
There's a drug trip room. You remember that one where you walk in and it's like a tie-dye weird drug trip background. It's just
I don't know if I remember that.
It's just it's like a green screen weird drug trip, flashy whatever in the background. It's kind of wild. There is a second castle in this game overlaid over the first. So instead of upside down, it's overlaid, and you can switch back and forth between them in these warp areas. And sometimes you can only get to a certain part of the castle by going through the other side of the castle and then back, which is kind of neat.
I did find that pretty confusing though. Like late game, it's kind of hard to figure out where to go sometimes.
Yeah, but I appreciated the effort. It felt a lot more like Symphony of the Night again. The level of effort.
It definitely felt a lot more complete than like a Circle of the Moon.
Yeah, there's a lot of false walls, false ceilings, some cool puzzles where you have to switch between them. Moving crates onto switches, breaking wall. There's one where you have to break a wall by knocking an enemy into it. There's one where you knock a set of living armor into some gears that kills it, and then you get the pieces of armor left over as equipment, which is neat. That. The graphics are overall pretty improved. Again, slight borders around some of them, but whatever.
Yeah.
The sprites are a little more lower res versions of Symphony of the Night sprites. Some of the bosses were interesting. There was a huge peeping big boss in the peeping eye, but it was a peeping big.
Oh yeah.
That was one of my favorites. I really liked the elemental stones and the like. There's a tip that was like a spike, and then there's one that's like a morning star tip. Mm-hmm. I think there was a flaming whip at some point. I forget.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, that's what you were saying. It was where you could upgrade your whip.
Yeah, you have a slot on your whip.
I don't know. I didn't care for that much, but
I appreciated it over the previous game. The previous game, you basically have the same whip pretty much through the whole game, aside from the cards that you use to use this. Sure. You get to completely change your whip, like to do different kinds of elements, or to just do overall more damage and reach with the spike ball and stuff.
Yeah, for the most part, I just chose the more damage route. I don't know. I'm kind of plain Jane when it comes to these playthroughs, but
yeah, I mean, but certain effects would affect certain enemies more.
Yeah,
and you couldn't always tell. Like most part, it would show you when the enemy died, like if they took more damage or not.
Yeah.
So if you're really technical on that, you can spend a little more effort on it. It has more armor slots. It has 4 instead of 3. Your whip control maybe is a little more precise. You can hold the button down to twirl it, or you can instead of holding it, you can twirl it manually like in Castlevania 4.
Sure.
A little bit. But later you get an item that you hold down that does spin it.
Yeah, I never really used it.
Yeah,
it's like whatever. It did such bad damage.
Yeah, you can. It's for bats and stuff. It's for things that die in one hit. You can dash forward or backward without an item, which is kind of nice, and you can continuously do that. So this is one of those games where you're just dashing constantly, to get through places quickly. I do kind of miss the toggle run. I feel like your jumps are a little slow and floaty.
They are
like a little more like Castlevania 4 than Rondo. Kind of slower, floatier jumps. I don't know. That's just what
I don't know how to explain it.
That's how it felt to me. Yeah. It's not bad. It's just different.
Yeah.
You do have the usual double jump, slide, dive kick. The dive kick was fun. I didn't
really use it that much.
I think there was a certain area where a certain enemy was easier to kill with dive kicks, like a certain boss. You could just dive kick it over and over and over again, just keep landing on its head.
Yeah,
it was kind of neat. Which is funny because you mentioned that thing in Bloodstained where you do the dive kicking off candles. Like that must.
Well, they use the dive kick as like a platforming thing in that game. Yeah.
Here it's for certain enemies. Like you don't use it a lot, but it's surprisingly effective against some enemies. So it's neat. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh yeah, it has the merchant, which it's kind of like the librarian in Symphony of the Night, but it didn't have any weapons for sale, obviously. So it's mostly just getting better armor.
He's like a food guy
and armor occasionally. I didn't care about him as much as I did in the previous game. As Symphony of the Night, I mean.
I mean, what I kind of liked about this game though is that it's probably the least grindiest Castlevania or Metroidvania game that there is.
For sure, and this game adds the monster book. Similar to the librarian setting, but it's in your menu where you can see what monsters and what they drop, and
that's helpful. But you don't even really need that.
But I'm just saying it's nice. I think this was the first game that had that built in.
Sure,
we expect that now.
Yeah,
but this is the first one that did it. I think.
This is one of the few games where like the monsters actually drop stuff pretty regularly, including food.
Yeah,
it's very easy to find things to sell to buy food. Like at the end of the game, I still had like 20 something potions left over. Like I didn't really struggle at all.
I mostly tried to avoid using potions for bosses. There was like 1 or 2 bosses where I spammed healing items because I didn't want to get good at fighting them. I just abused items. Yeah. The monster book does tell you the vulnerabilities of monsters. So if you're struggling with something, it'll tell you, oh, use this element of it.
I always found like spell books with whatever overpowered item you have, like anything with the cross is basically just godly.
So did you fill up the furniture room?
No, I was like 4 short, I think.
Yeah, I think I finished it, and I have no idea why. Like, I don't think it actually gives you anything. It
doesn't do anything.
It's just a neat... I have to look it up again, but I didn't find that there was anything fancy that it actually does.
I was missing a few, and I just didn't want to go back and collect them.
It was neat, but...
It's cool.
It was weird. And then finally there was a boss rush mode, where you just go through fighting bosses.
And that became a thing in like the RA games as well, right?
Yeah, I think different ways. Like here, it was just a mode. Like in some of the other games, it would be part of the game. Like it would be an arena or something.
Yeah.
But there's also a mode to play as Maxim, who is the friend. So the story, we didn't even talk about the storyline. This game you're playing as Justa Belmont, who is, I think he might have been Simon's descendant a little ways down. I forget.
Remember.
I think he's like a generation or so after Simon Belmont, I believe. And you initially in the game, you're talking to his friend Maxim, who's another vampire hunter. The usual thing. Oh, why is my friend here? Oh, because he's going to be corrupted. I'm going to have to fight him.
Yeah.
It's that trope again.
All of these stories just mesh in my brain so much.
They do, because they're very similar.
Yeah.
But you get to play as Maxim, and he's pretty neat. He kind of plays a little more like a faster, better version of Justa, but he's got like a sword and better sub weapons.
Okay.
And you can play as Simon Belmont in this game.
I saw that. Yeah. And that looked amazing.
It was pretty, and it shows like a Simon Belmont looking sprite, I believe.
Yeah, I think it does, yeah.
It was kind of neat. I would consider this basically as close as you can get to a GBA port of Symphony of the Night until you start getting to, the games like the Sorrow games that kind of surpass it in some ways.
Yeah.
Like this is more of just trying to purely port over as much as they can, except for, like I said, you're playing in a straight Belmont mode the whole time.
I think the only thing I didn't like about this game too is the amount of backtracking. It gets really long after a while.
Yeah.
Like there's not. Yeah. There are a lot of teleport rooms that do open up, but like it gets hard to make it to the next teleport room. Like it can take 5 minutes just traveling back and forth.
Yeah. I mean, overall, I give this a 4.5.
I give it a 4.
Yeah, I really liked this game. I liked it better than I thought it would, because a lot of people complain about different things about it. The only thing I really ding it for is it just feels slightly lower in quality than the Sorrow games. Mostly.
Oh yeah, the Sorrow games I loved. This one was like, it's close.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
But I don't know. There's just something lacking for me.
It definitely is a significantly better than Circle of the Moon.
Oh yeah, Circle of the Moon I have is like, I don't know. I wouldn't play that again, but like Harmony of Dissonance, I would play maybe a Maxim mode or whatever. I wouldn't mind it. Yeah,
and definitely give it a shot. I mean, don't let the similarity to Circle of the Moon throw you off, or some of the complaints about
it's definitely better.
Yeah,
Circle of the Moon,
I think people forget this game a lot. I don't think it stands out as much.
I've barely even heard about it until we were going to do this, and I found it at Game Exchange for, I don't know, $40 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, but good game.
Yeah,
nothing too bad about it. And that leads us to the peak of the Game Boy Advance game, which is Aria of Sorrow.
Yes, I didn't even write down anything for this, and it's actually been a while since I played this, but this game is great. It follows Soma. This is probably the last. This and the sequel to it are the last games in the timeline, right?
Yes.
So yeah, just a new kid. He gets. What is the deal? Like what?
So the basic idea here is, all these Castlevania games you're playing is basically Dracula getting killed, and then 100 years later, more or less, he basically the world becomes evil enough, or people are calling for Dracula to come back, and he comes back. Somebody does a dark ritual, somebody gets his body parts and drips blood on him, somebody does something, and Dracula comes back. That's kind of the overall storyline of all these Castlevania games. So a certain thing happens, which called the Battle of 1999. Which you don't get to play through, which is my biggest regret in all these games. They have not done a game about the Battle of 1999, because it sounds badass. But it involves Julius Belmont, like the last of the Belmonts, more or less, and Alucard, who's still around, sealing Dracula and his castle in the lunar eclipse. So he's basically sealed in this alternate world or alternate like parallel world, like in the eclipse or whatever. So the idea being that even if he's resurrected, like he's still like he can't get through to this world.
Right, he's just stuck out there.
He's like kind of stuck out there. Like they killed him and then they sealed the castle, I should say. So he's dead and his castle's out there, and so people can't bring him back, kind of thing. But what happens now is there's this prophecy, whatever, blah blah blah. He gets reincarnated instead of he's not coming back, but he got reincarnated as Soma Cruz.
Okay.
And so Soma is basically has the ability to become the new Dracula, essentially. So he's not Dracula, but he could be. So it's an interesting take on it.
Yeah.
And they do a good job with the story. The story, this has the most lore in the game out of any of these games, including Symphony of the Night, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Aria of Sorrow is where they start to kind of go back, I would say, to more of the Symphony of the Night, but actually expanding onto that gameplay.
They finally start building off of Symphony of the Night.
Right. So they went back, they said, okay, Harmony, Dissonance, Circle of the Moon, yeah, whip, we've been there, done that. Let's go back to Symphony.
Yep.
You have a whole slew of weapons and different style kind of weapons and attacks that you can do.
Yep.
But on top of that, now they added new abilities that you can earn by killing monsters. And there's a ton of them.
Yep.
Some are good, some suck, but like they're all different enough where you want to try out a bunch of them.
Yep.
So you kill a monster, they have a chance to drop items. They can drop, their monster abilities, which Soma absorbs.
Their souls.
Yeah, and then he can use their souls for cool moves.
Yep.
And like, as far as gameplay goes, I think it's kind of like the peak of what you can do with the GBA.
Oh yeah, it feels much more like a port of Symphony of the Night than even Harmony of Dissonance. It plays similarly, but the controls are a little tighter. Your jumping and stuff's a little smoother. It's more like Alucard.
Yeah, and they add more types of weapons than like Symphony would have. Like they add in the great swords now.
Yep. Yeah, it's so you start out with a little penknife, basically, it just pokes in front of you.
Yeah.
You get a sword. There's swords that swing ahead of you, swords that swing over your head. Things you can throw. You get a gun at one point. You don't use a lot.
I never really used the guns in any of these games, but
it's neat.
I'm assuming there's a point to them.
There can be. I mean, the range goes all the way across the screen, and it's really fast.
Sure.
So there's certain when you're farming, it can be. When you're farming easy stuff, it can be nice. But the playthrough is great. The main characters are entertaining. There's a whole cast of characters that show up regularly throughout the game.
Yep. Tank, is that his name?
It's no, what's his name? Hammer.
Oh, Hammer.
Yeah, Hammer is the military guy that shows up and serves as the merchant. Julius, the Belmont, current Belmont, hangs around, and he kind of warms up to Soma, but is still like, if you turn evil, I'm gonna have to kill you. And Alucard shows up, but he's Genya Arikado or whatever. He's basically Alucard, but he's in a suit, and he's kind of fitting in with the mortals essentially. Right. He's decided to stop being aloof, and he basically is working with the church essentially.
He stopped resting for a century just to hang out.
Yeah, he started hanging out more with the mortals and assisting the mortals. And then you have Yoko, who's, I think she's a Belnades descendant. She's a Sypha Belnades descendant.
Yeah.
And so she's in the church. She's like a sorceress, whatever, in the church.
Yeah.
Kind of, the church in a lot of these games, it's either like this organization that is kind of at odds with the Belmonts, or sometimes kind of works with them to try and keep the world safe. It kind of depends on the storyline.
Yeah.
Here it's a little more of a benevolent, trying to stop monsters and stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of entity. But like I said, the storyline is great. My only regret is you don't get to see this battle of 1999 where Julius gets. I'd love to see them go back and do a game of that sometime.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, right. the equipment is even more limited than in the GBA games. Other GBA games, unfortunately.
But I kind of like that. I kind of like how they stripped it down and they made it easier.
Yeah,
but again, like I after you play all these grindy games, it's kind of nice to go back to like. I mean, you still have to grind out the souls if you want to do the soul stuff.
I just mean you have a body slot and you have an accessory slot. I like having 2 accessory slots.
Whatever.
It's fine. It just gives you more options in some of the games. But the variety of weapons, that's Symphony of the Night level.
Yeah, it's very fun.
There's some of them, you have things like Balmung and Gungnir and Claim Solea. Some of these weapons are just overpowered and destroy things.
They're utterly gigantic on the screen. Like it makes you feel pretty good.
And then you have some of them that are just quirky, like the whip sword.
Yeah.
Which is just a sword that extends as far as a whip, and you use it for a hot minute, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah, a lot of them are just in and out.
There's boomerangs that are kind of fun. Yeah. They're neat. Yeah. Yeah, you get some decent upgrades very quickly, and so then you kind of get an idea. Oh, there's these different styles of weapons, so I can either use more like these big, slow, heavy weapons, or I can use these faster, up close weapons.
And it really depends, like what platforming and what part of the castle or whatever you're in. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes the greatsword's great if you have a lot of like sweeping pattern enemies, like Medusa heads and stuff. It's like so easy. Like using a knife on the Medusa heads is like a freaking nightmare. So
yeah, and you have a dash back move, so you can like go in and do a heavy hit, dash back. You can joust with big enemies. You have a use for money. You go to Hammer's shop and you can buy weapons and armor, which is nice, and consumables.
Yeah,
and maps and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and backtracking is not like a nightmare in this game. They really simplified a lot of it.
Yeah, the soul system, I think it's my favorite support system of all these games.
Me too, yeah.
You have a huge variety of attacks and utility. I believe you have 3 different categories. You have one that's like active things that are, it's like up and attack to throw a bone or shoot an arrow or something. And then you have things that are just permanently effective. And then you have things that are like you hold the shoulder button to like glide.
Yeah, it's like one utility, one stat boost, and one offensive move.
Yeah, which is perfect. Yeah, and a nice variety. The sequel does a similar thing, but also you get multiple copies of each and some of them power up. I think I kind of prefer it here where you just get it.
Same here.
And you don't have to grind out more of it. I do miss later on where you get to use them for crafting, but whatever. It's fine either way. The drop rate doesn't seem to be horribly low on almost anything.
No.
So you pretty much can get anything you need to get without too much difficulty. The graphics are great. The hardware, it pretty much maxes out, I think, what you can do in the GBA hardware.
And the music is awesome.
Detailed backgrounds, all kinds of little amusing animations. The sprites are great. It is anime-esque. Some people criticize it. It's, it's Castlevania anime. I like it.
I like it a lot.
Fine. The music is great. It's not Symphony of the Night level, but it does a good job of setting the mood. It keeps you engaged.
Yeah, for a Game Boy Advance game, like, there's zero complaints there.
It does the same system of later games where hearts equals MP.
Sure.
So all of your special attacks are MP, and you get hearts to refill your MP. It doesn't have to have 2 separate bars. You just have.
But it's so easy to refill hearts in this game.
Yeah, and you save when you save in the save rooms, it refills your hearts.
Exactly, so, and that like should be a staple. It always should have been, but
yep. The enemies and bosses all feel like right out of Symphony of the Night. Yep. There's some of them are modified versions to fit in the hardware, or some of them have little quirks. They're rarely hard, but they're fun. Very little frustrating. It's overall just a fun game. It's like Symphony of the Night. You just kind of burn through the game and enjoy yourself. Very little banging your head against the wall trying to get through things.
Yeah, and I think there's an unlockable like boss fight mode at the end of it that I think you get some pretty badass items if you complete it under a certain time limit or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I've always heard, and I never did this, but like there's one monster soul that you can get, like the Minotaur or something, that basically one-shots a lot of the bosses. So
yeah, this game has a lot of depth if you want to get all the things.
Yeah, you can really optimize like your soul patterns in order to like really dish out some mega damage.
Yeah, there is a hard mode, I believe. I didn't play through it recently, but one of these days I might try that again.
Yeah, that sounds great if it's an option.
Yeah, and there's a lot of interesting hacks. If you want to trade, people have made hacks so it looks more like the colors look a little more like Symphony of the Night.
Sure. Or
that you get to play as different. You can play as Hugh Morris from Circle of the Moon. Okay. Or you can play as different. You can play as Alucard. You can play as all kinds of wacky stuff. It's great. There's a ton of interesting hacks, and you can enjoy. And then the game engine's so great. In some cases, I think sometimes they even move stuff around and put in different items and stuff. It's great.
Yeah. No, like I absolutely love the game. I give it a 5.
I gave it a 5. Easy 5.
I have 0 issues with it whatsoever. So
yeah, I don't know if I almost hesitate to say perfect, but it's basically there.
Yeah, this is actually the first Metroidvania game I ever played. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, I hope it just gets better from here.
Yeah,
but it didn't.
I still kind of enjoy Symphony of the Night a little better, maybe just because of the being on the PlayStation and the slightly better music and all that, but. This is so freaking close.
I think I enjoy the stripped down experience a little bit more, but that's just me like not wanting to grind.
Yeah, and I love playing this on my Pocket. getting the Pocket improved my love for this game even more because playing it on the big screen is awesome.
Absolutely. I played mine on not Super Game. Oh, the Game Boy Player on GameCube.
I could see that being good too. Yeah.
Which the only thing that sucks is the Game Boy Player controller is dog shit. So. Yeah. Like playing on that tiny little like GameCube D-pad. Oof.
So that going on to our next game, like the only thing I regret, probably one of the few things I regret about this next game is I couldn't play it on my pocket, and I don't have a way to take my DS and play it on the big screen. And that takes us to, as I said, on the DS, Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow, which is a direct sequel to Aria of Sorrow.
Yep.
And this one came out in 2005. This one, it's interesting. I haven't really been mentioning, this one actually has a bit of a 2-player mode where you can do some trading and stuff.
Huh.
Has some interesting stuff for trading souls and things like that.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of it either, but yeah, there's some odd multiplayer stuff that they just crammed in. But,
yeah, I mean, this is one of those games where, like, I don't know if I liked it as much as Aria of Sorrow, but like it's almost better in every single way if you think about it.
Yeah, it's got additional buttons that they made use of. You have additional features. It had the crafting, which I overall like. It's a little grindier, but
yeah, there's more stuff to
terrible.
do. The grinding is definitely worse. Like I do remember I gave up on grinding some things.
Yeah,
because in order to craft up your weapons, you do have to grind monster souls or other things, which can take quite a while sometimes.
Honestly, that was my favorite part of the game. So
I know, and that's like different strokes for different folks. You know, like.
Yes.
For me, it's like, okay, if I spend 10 minutes grinding one item, I get really sick of it. Especially, did you grind the soul from the iron golems?
Yes. I everything in the game.
You're fucking nuts. That's crazy.
But again, this is one of those games where you have to set everything up. So you have to get, like, there's so many ways to pile on luck. You have to do all the luck things together. And like, there's early in the game, there's a ghost dancer enemy that you can kill.
Oh, I know. I did that too.
Soul. And you have to get, if you get 9 of his souls, then you get the max luck from him.
See, now, I didn't understand that you could, like, combine your souls, or how does that work? Like,
well, so some of the souls, like the luck soul, it gives you a boost of luck. Yeah. If you get one time, you get a small boost of luck. For every time you get up to 9, it's 9 times the amount of luck.
Okay.
So one of the first things you do in that game is grind 9 of that luck soul, and you equip it throughout almost the entire game.
See, I didn't understand that at all.
And there's like a strength soul. Again, same thing. You can grind out 9 of that strength soul and increases your damage quite a bit. There's not all of the souls are like that, but a lot of them are.
Yeah, when I play these games, I generally just try to like burst right through them.
A lot of the souls, like, you can get multiple copies, but they don't necessarily do more. But you still need multiple copies for some of them for crafting.
Yeah, like you can have like a katana, for example. Is this the first game that had katanas, or did Aria have those too?
Symphony of the Night had them. I thought Aria had them
did
too.
Symphony?
Yeah, Symphony definitely had katanas.
Okay. But yeah, this is I don't know, you get an item, you can upgrade them with souls up to a certain point. You can make pretty god tier items depending on how much you feel like grinding.
Yeah, there are certain items, certain souls, I believe, at the end of the game where you kind of have to make a choice about whether you'd rather have the item or the soul or the item. I'm trying to remember. Maybe I'm thinking of one of the later ones. But I thought there was like 1 or 2 souls that came from a boss.
Okay.
Where you had to decide if you rather have the soul or the item. Maybe I'm thinking of a different... There's a couple of these games that have a similar thing, but
anyway. I think what I finished the game was with the like second...
Oh, yep, here it is. Yeah, I did write that down.
Maybe I had the last... Was it called like the last sword or something?
Yes. Yeah, because there's like 2 or 3 of the souls that you can get in the game that come from a boss.
Okay.
And so you can only get them once because it's a boss.
Yeah.
And they're some of the better souls in the game, but they can get you some of the better weapons in the game. So you have to choose, which would you rather prefer? Do you want to be more magic-y or do you want to be more melee-y?
Yeah, and like the magic spells are so overpowered if you get the right ones anyway, that you can pretty much just kill the bosses with magic.
Yeah, this is one of the games where you can like really go crazy with the magic if you want. Like you can go heavy magic. I think that's
what I did for most of the late games. I just went heavy magic.
Yeah. Again, you have one thing I liked about this game when you started out. You got like 6 different weapons in the first couple screens.
Oh yeah.
So like immediately gives you a variety. Like these are all the things you can do.
Yeah, you're not stuck with just a knife. Like...
Yeah. That was great. Hammer, you find right away the merchant who gives you a variety of weapons and armor again. You actually get the pistols and thrown weapons very early in this game.
See, I always skip those. I don't know if I should have or not, but...
They're not required, but you get the regular pistol super early in this game, and it's great for grinding.
Okay.
Because you can, there's certain zones where there's an enemy, you step into the room, bang, bang, dead, step out, step in, bang, bang, dead, and you don't have to get close to the enemy. You can kill him really quickly.
Now, I did all of my grinding with essentially a monster soul. I think it's called like the Wailing Sapling or whatever.
Okay.
It's
the Mandrake.
Yeah, the
Okay.
Mandrake.
Yeah,
The one where you just toss it and it basically just clears the screen.
Yeah.
So you just walk in and out of rooms, you throw it, you walk in and out of like it's super quick. That's
Yeah.
just how I did mine.
Yeah, that works too. Yeah, I mean you have a lot of options.
Yeah,
That's great about it. Yeah, but there are so many like I said, the thrown weapons. There's scythes and boomerangs and stuff that you can double up. So you can just be chucking thrown weapons all over the place. Yoko, as I said, shows up again, but this time she handles those upgrades. The soul forging is what they call it. And I like how you can see ahead of time what the next craftable weapon is.
Yeah,
so
nice.
You know what weapon you need and you know what soul you need. So you have a list of these are the weapons, these are the souls I need to grind when I see these. You know ahead of time when I see one of these I might need to grind him a couple times.
Right.
So that's neat. And to me it was super addicting. This game is crack for me. I will play this game forever and even more so than Symphony of the Night, I think. Because of the crafting system.
There is so much grinding possibilities in this one.
So you either love it and it's addicting, or you hate it and you just want to get through it, I guess.
See, I didn't hate it, but I eventually got to that point where it's like, oh, okay, I got other games to play. Like,
it's almost entirely optional, but I love it. And it starts off with a great tutorial in the game telling you how the soul system works, so that part's great. Some of the souls are useful the whole game. Like the Manticore one where you have this tail that jabs in front of you and does damage. I use that throughout the whole game and it does a ton of damage.
I use the Mandrake for like 90% of the game.
Yeah, the witch one is good. Yeah, there's so many of them that are good. Ghoul lets you eat spoiled food.
Yeah, I never used that, but I knew because you can buy or not buy, but you can find like rotten mashed potatoes or whatever.
There's an area where you're fighting ghouls to farm a certain thing, a certain soul, and I was getting a ton of the rotten meat.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, what on earth is this for? You can't sell everything. Oh, you can turn as a ghoul, eat it, and then turn back to normal, and it's good food then. It gives you a lot of hit points back. Skelerang lets you double up the thrown weapons. As I said, normally you can only throw one, but if you use the Skelerang soul, you can double up. There are others that you can use to bypass obstacles. Like the Puppet Master that throws a puppet, and you can throw it through some gaps, and then you switch places with the puppet.
So that's stuff that you have to grind. You just have to kind of like almost luck into it. But if you notice like what the enemies are doing,
yes,
you can know like, okay, that might come in useful later.
I think the Puppet Master one, there was like a little visual clue. Like they showed like some kind of little doll.
There is, yeah.
They go out of their way to try and give you, if you're paying attention, to try and give you ideas of things you could be doing.
But there's like that chariot one.
Yeah.
There's like a spike room or something that like you cannot really get past, and you try it and you die every time.
Yeah.
And then like I just killed a chariot guy until he gave me his soul, and then I could completely skip that room later on.
There's one where there's obstacles that you need the bone arc to carry you over.
Oh man, that's what I was talking about. My bad.
Yeah,
that's the one I was talking about.
Yeah, that one took me a while. I didn't figure that one as well.
That one took me a hot minute.
Yeah. It does require some, duplicate soul collecting if you want to max out everything. To me, it wasn't the most tedious game. Like, the drop rate's usually lower, so it's not... Instead of having to fight, 100 enemies to get one item, you're maybe fighting 10 to get one soul, but you need 9 of the soul. It feels better.
Yeah, I kind of reached my limit of one, the iron golems or whatever. I'm just like, okay, these guys, take an average of, 50 seconds a kill. I'd have to kill, 100 of them. Yeah. Nah, I'm good.
Yeah, you can rule out some of those things. I don't think... Very few of them are actually needed.
Yeah.
But if it's addicting to you, great. There's some neat things. There's a 777 shirt and a luck soul that you can get that boosts your luck like crazy.
Yeah.
I think the 777 shirt was behind a door that has 777 written on it, and I
forgot about those. Yeah,
you have to go up to the door with 777 coins at the end of it.
It took me a minute to figure out what are you supposed to do with those.
Yeah, there's a lot of neat little puzzles like that. So there's the magic seal system is probably the black sheep of this thing.
I didn't like that whatsoever.
It's gimmicky. It's an excuse to use the touchscreen. Basically, you kill a boss. When you're going into where the boss is, it does the seal to tell you what you need to know.
Sure, you have to basically draw a pattern on your Game Boy.
You only have to do the pattern after you kill the boss. If you screw up, the boss comes back to life and you have to kill him again. Maybe with partial health, I forget.
Don't remember.
I never had the problem, but I think there was one case where I had to do something a second time.
Yeah.
It's a gimmick. It's one of the more gimmicky things they added. It's unfortunate. It's not terrible though.
I hate when games force touchscreen or motion controls, and that was just Like, oh, come on.
There was a couple things where it was less irritating. Like there's one where you're clearing blocks with the stylus. That was kind of
that was fun.
That's
okay.
fun,
But
there's a handful of them. But yeah, they tried to use it and they didn't try too hard.
Yeah, like I like puzzles. I don't like forced. Just,
the graphics overall I love. I thought it made good use of the hardware to show like the detailed backgrounds and the animations. There's one at the beginning where you land on a van covered with snow and it shifts it shifts on its shocks and the snow falls off.
Yeah, it's very cool.
A lot of little stuff like that. There's eyes and paintings that turn to watch you.
Yep.
They're just large detailed sprites everywhere. It's just a great game.
Yeah, I gave this one a 5.
Yes.
As well. Just like I think between Aria of Sorrow and Dawn of Sorrow, I like Aria of Sorrow better, but just because it's a stripped down version of Dawn of Sorrow.
I think Aria flows a little better, but Dawn has more. It has more stuff. Meat, it has more meat to it. So yeah, if the grinding in Dawn annoys you, then play Aria.
Yeah.
I really wish I could play Dawn on a big screen.
I know that's.
I mean, aside from an emulator, I'm sure there's an emulator that works for it. But
that's the one thing that sucks about the DS. It's not like easily emulatable.
I think you can do it now on the Steam Deck. I think I've heard.
Okay.
I'd be interested. I'd have to try that. I'm pretty sure I've seen emulators for it, but I just like playing these on like some kind of actual console.
Oh yeah, I want to play 4x3 on a big screen. Like
right.
It's so much easier nowadays.
Yeah. But yeah, I would give it a 5 stars as well. It's almost a perfect game. The two of them together are near perfect, I think.
Yeah, and it's really just pick whichever one you think you'd like more.
Yep.
You'll like either one of them. It doesn't matter.
And it's weird how they started out with this on the DS.
Yeah.
I guess because they had such a perfect game already. They barely had to do anything to bring it over to the DS, and they managed to nail it in one.
Well, Dave, take us through Portrait of Ruin, which is a 2006 DS release. I do not have. Actually, out of all these games, this is the only one I don't actually own.
Yeah.
I don't have like an easily emulatable DS option right now. So
okay.
But what is it? How is it? Is it good? Does it suck? I'll just take your word for it.
Yeah, so this is another one that has some weird little minor multiplayer options. There's like a shop mode where you can put your DS in shop mode and people can buy stuff from you. And there's a boss rush mode where you can play together with someone else, which is neat. But this is another one where they tried to use kind of some gimmicky stuff, but here it actually worked out better. And I didn't think it would, but then I played it, I was like, okay, it actually works. The music and sound here is okay. It's maybe slightly worse than Dawn of Sorrow, but not at all bad. It's just less memorable, I feel like, a little more just average. The game starts out with kind of an anime-esque intro movie, which was fine. It did a pretty good job of showing the two main characters, who are Charlotte and Jonathan. Charlotte is like a sorceress. I don't know if she's like a Belnades descendant or if she's just someone that works with the church or whatever. Jonathan is Jonathan Morris. So this is the character I mentioned before where he's...
So it's not John Morris, it's a descendant of...
Okay. He's the Jonathan Morris's grandson, I think, or son, I forget. I think son. Because there's a storyline in this where you find out that his father is gone, and his father didn't really train him fully in how to use the vampire killer, which he has. And so he's very butthurt about that the whole game. And then later on he finds out, spoilers, that the reason his father didn't train him is because that it drains his health by using it, because he's not a Belmont. And so what you find out is
there's a lot of lore in this game.
There's a lot of lore in this game. And I might be confusing the Morrises, but the one in Bloodlines basically died afterwards because of using the whip.
Oh, really?
Because of overusing it. And so he basically, I think he didn't die immediately, but it shortened his lifespan or whatever. And so he trained his son on being a vampire killer, but he wanted him to be good enough at killing vampires and stuff on his own without having to use the vampire, without having to use that whip. But turns out you don't actually need to. You can choose to learn to use it or not. It doesn't really seem to affect the ending or anything. It's just, that part was a little weird. Like, you'd think they'd have a thing at the end, like, oh, he died because he used the whip, or he overcame it, or blah, blah, blah.
So what are your weapons in this game?
So you start out with the vampire killer,
okay,
which is just a standard whip, but it plays like just a regular leather whip. It's pretty weak. But then you also get a variety of other weapons, like all the like the Soma games.
Oh, okay.
So most of the game, you're better off just using a variety of weapons. The controls in this game are pretty similar to Dawn of Sorrow, but you can use some of the additional buttons to switch between Jonathan and Charlotte. And so they have separate equipment. Charlotte uses books that when you hold it in front of her, it'll like shoot out a sword, or it'll shoot out a different effects. Yeah, it just makes like most of them just are something that's just in front of her, or like a huge sprite in front of her.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them are ranged, but maybe there was one. It seems a little gimmicky at first, but the more you use it, it actually is really cool, because you can switch between the two of them. Like if one of them gets poisoned, you can switch to the other, so you're not taking the constant damage. You get power-ups throughout the game where you can like have the one character come out and like hold her hands up so you can jump off of her to get to a platform.
So it's kind of like Mary Kate and Ashley game on Game Boy.
But done well.
Okay.
Like I said, it seems gimmicky. When you first see it, you're like, oh, this is just a gimmick. But once you get used to it, you can get good at like switching between the two of them quickly to hurt bosses in different ways. And like one of them can use a magic spell to power up the other one and things like that.
Oh, interesting.
There's all this cool stuff. And like I said, the more you get into it, the more it's interesting.
Do they share a life bar or have their own, or what?
I forget now. I thought they shared a life bar, but they have different equipment.
Okay.
So like you can like load up one of them on luck equipment and the other on like you go on for taking damage or whatever, or you make one for dealing damage, one for taking damage, different things. Mostly I used Jonathan, but I used Charlotte for buffs and stuff.
Sure.
Like you could use a variety of buffs for her onto him, and then you can switch in to do certain effects and stuff. Like there's a book she uses that does like a thing that covers in front of her really well, so you could switch to her if you're fighting like Medusa heads or something that are hard to hit with your regular weapon.
Yeah, and just kind of tank some stuff.
Yeah. There's a huge variety of equipment. You have 6 armor slots in this game, and a main weapon and a sub weapon spell slot.
Oh my lord!
It's
why?
Wild. Well, it actually works. Charlotte, like I said, uses mostly books. Some of them conjure weapons or spirits. Jonathan uses a variety of weapons. He gets some little whip tricks and things with power-ups. At the very end of the game, like I said, you get the fully upgraded vampire killer, which is ridiculous. There's actually multiple whips that you get through the game. There's like a leather whip, a chain whip. There's one whip called Nebula that like does this wild like parabola pattern like across the screen. There's a lot of cool whips. This game is another one that combines your hearts and MP into the same stat. So collecting hearts again refills your MP, all that stuff. A lot of the typical enemies are there. Huge, well-animated bosses. The bosses start to have some really interesting attack patterns. And sometimes you need to switch between both characters to figure stuff out. That one of Legion, the guy with all the bodies, is really interesting here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's got a really cool fight for that guy. That's probably the most impressive one. It's not super challenging, but it looks impressive, especially on the DS. The graphics overall are great. They make good use of multiple layers, all kinds of decorations in the foreground and background. So this is like a standard fighting in a castle, but you've got these portraits everywhere. And when you basically have to enter the portraits and fight, and then it's a whole separate map, like a fairly large map.
Interesting.
And so one of them's like a pyramid, one's a town, one's a circus,
so
one's a forest.
Each portrait is kind of like its own little dungeon or whatever.
Yeah, but they're like pretty large.
Okay.
So thinking of what Aria is, like the overall main castle is maybe a quarter of the size of that or so, and then all of the other portraits are about the same size.
Wow.
So the overall game is pretty sizable. And it's all wildly different in presentation, so it doesn't get boring. You have a series of quests there's an NPC you meet named Wind, who's a ghost, and that's all he just introduces himself as Wind, and he gives you all these quests. And as you complete them, you unlock different weapons and armor and skills. One of the things he gives you is the Alucard spear, and you figure out later on he's Eric Lacard.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's neat. So it ties in very closely with Bloodlines. So if you like Bloodlines, you play Bloodlines and play this.
It's kind of like a sequel to each other.
It kind of is a sequel to it, yeah.
Okay.
And then there's a mastery system for sub-weapons, which is one of those grindy things that can keep a lot of time. But basically, if you keep using a sub-weapon, it gets better. And so some of the sub-weapons at first don't seem... And these are the sub-weapons that Jonathan uses, not the spells that she uses.
Yeah.
So like your cross and all that stuff, you have like a huge, like a dozen or 2 dozen different sub weapons for him, and you can choose to buy or not. It doesn't really matter. But if you power them up, some of them get ridiculously powerful. And so you can choose whether I ended up fully powering up all of them, because after you get to
how many hours did you spend on this?
A lot. But after you get to a certain point in the game, you get certain things that like increase the amount of mastery you get and things and speed it up. So you can get to a certain point in the game, buy a certain ring, and then it makes it easier to at the end of the game to charge them all up. And I just did it just to see, because some of them are really cool and some of them aren't really worth it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have a huge variety of sub weapons for him and a huge variety of spells for her. And you could play a fully spellcaster game with her if you wanted. You could play mostly melee with him. You can choose whether or not to upgrade the vampire killer. You have to fight Richter. You like basically like kind of like enter the whip and fight Richter. You like it's like fighting the spirit of the whip. And Richter was the last Belmont in this timeline who had used the whip.
Okay.
So this is well after Symphony of the Night and all that.
Is Richter? Who would be the last user of the whip right now in canon Castlevania?
Julius. So you have Symphony of the Night, Rondo and Symphony of the Night, and Richter, like I said, was partially corrupted and all that, and so he was like, okay, I'm not going to use this whip anymore. So after that, there weren't really any Belmonts for a while. They kind of went into hiding, essentially.
Right, okay.
And so then that's when you had the Morrises and the Baldwins and some of these other families were bequeathed the vampire killer and were kind of picking up the slack. And so then this one, you have now, you have like the first of the Morris clan to actually fully unlock the power of the whip and not die. Like
sure.
His dad, I think, did 2 in Bloodlines, but then died from it. His dad or his grandpa, I always get the 2 confused. But he unlocks, and so again, part of the unlocking part is beating up the last Belmont who had it, which is Richter. So there's this, it's actually a really hard boss fight. Like you either have to crank your levels up to the maximum to beat him, or you have to get the right combination. Like he's light aligned, so you can like get certain dark weapons that do more damage to him, or you can power up certain sub weapons to annihilate him, or you can jump on his head like 100 times.
Super Mario his ass.
Kinda, yeah. Like he still like moves around and does nasty damage to you, but if you can avoid getting hit and just keep bouncing on his head, that's one way to kill him. It's wild. Overall, this game I did not go in with high hopes. I was thinking he was going to be gimmicky and whatever. I ended up giving it a 4.5 stars.
Oh wow!
It's one of my favorite. It's not as good as Dawn, but it's close.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to find a copy of this at some point. But
yeah, I would recommend this one is worth playing. It's just slightly lower quality. Like the sound isn't quite as good. It's a couple things, but it is so close. And if I think the systems like the switching characters and all that make it worth playing.
Sure.
So.
All right, are we on to the last one?
The last of the DS games, and then I wanted to talk about that alternate game. So,
okay.
The last one then is Order of Ecclesia.
Yeah, so this
came out in 2008.
A DS game, pretty late.
Yeah, very late.
Man, okay, so the story of this one follows, I forgot what her face is. Oh my God. Shinoa. This is kind of it's another one of those games where you have your protagonist.
Yes.
You have her mentor.
Yeah, and her rival.
And and a rival. And
yep.
lo and behold, the mentor is evil.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. And the rival wasn't actually, this one is a little different because the rival wasn't actually evil in this one, even though he was doing some kind of naughty
he was
things.
Also kind of a dickbag. So.
He was a little bit of a dick, but he had a good heart or whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely a different art style than the other Castlevania games. It's a little like more Victorian style.
They were going for a different look.
Yeah, and I don't think you're any longer. Yeah, there's no Dracula's castle in this one, right? Or maybe the last area
there is at the very end. Yeah, you kind of unlock.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the very final area of the game is Dracula's castle, which is actually surprisingly like most of the game.
Kinda, yeah. This is another one of those that's because it's on the DS. It has some multiplayer for like vote versus mode or trading items or something.
Yeah, which I mean nowadays like that's not really a thing, but
yeah. The music and stuff as this is another slight step down from Portrait. I didn't like it as much.
I don't recall a single soundtrack in this game.
No, it didn't feel very Castlevania to me. It's the music is okay. It just didn't feel super Castlevania.
Yeah, and the gameplay is a little different. They seem to really want to force the dual weapon system.
Yeah, well this is probably the best of the Metroidvanias for flexibility and play style.
Oh, sure.
If you want to go purely mage type, you can. If you want to go purely physical, you can. I think they're probably equally powerful in this game.
Yeah, so you can basically equip whatever you want. You one weapon, one magic spell, two magic spells, two weapons, slew of armor, and whatchamacallit. But
yeah, you have a similar loadout to your armor and other games, but weapons are all based on glyphs.
Yeah, glyphs are these absorbable powers that you can get from monsters or bosses or whatever.
Yeah, which, I mean, you either like it or you don't.
I didn't hate it.
This game went back to separate MP and hearts. Hearts, they don't automatically restore when you save, but there are caches where you can get like a full chunk of hearts. Like in town, you can go to it.
There's a town, basically.
There's a town, where you can go back and refill your hearts quickly. Again, hearts are another one of those things you only use on bosses mostly.
And this is the only game that kind of had like a level select for Metroidvania.
Kinda, yeah. Yeah, you have a map where you can go to the... So yeah, it's instead of one big castle, it's just all these different locations on the map that...
Yeah.
And the nice thing about it is they're mostly fairly small, and they have a separate completion percentage for each one. So you can kind of easily tell for each map how much stuff you're missing.
Yeah, and the more stuff you unlock, then you can go back to previous locations and get better items or different cliffs or whatever you want to do. There's a town where NPCs in the town are unlockable.
Yep, and they give you quests and stuff.
Yeah, you have to find them throughout the maps, unlock them, save them, then they give you quests.
Yep.
So it's not really a grindy game at all.
No, and it does a good job, but you don't have to take forever to get from one area to the other.
It's pretty quick.
There's only a few of the maps that are big enough where it takes you a while to get to a certain part.
There's a couple of the areas that are just big and pretty empty, which I didn't really enjoy.
There's a few. I will say, though, again, the glyph system, it's okay, but again, there's no actual weapons. All of your weapons are glyph-based. They all require magic, MP. The regular weapons use so little MP that they may as well not cost MP.
I always thought it was like a stamina system.
Well, what basically it is if you keep spamming it enough, you will eventually run out. For the basic attacks, it's really hard to run out. For the bigger, burstier glyphs, you can burn through your MP pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I don't like it as much. I just don't.
Yeah, and this game is a little different. Like, this is one of those games, kind of like Curse of the Moon, where the bosses are much harder than like a standard enemy.
Much harder.
So, like, your standard enemies are, for the most part, pretty easy. I mean, early game, some of them can give you quite a bit of trouble, but the boss fights are much more of like a cinematic experience.
Yeah.
They're not just like, hey, like Symphony of the Night, for example, the boss appears and dies within 5 seconds.
Yeah.
In this case, like, you're fighting a boss and hammering away at it for minutes at a time sometimes.
Yeah, some of them have way too much health and just take forever unless you use certain combos. So this is a game where there are some brutal combos. Like after you get death, kill Death and get his ring and fight Dracula, the ring you get, I believe it lets you die in one hit, but you do tons more damage.
Oh yeah, if you want to cheese a boss, you definitely can.
So you equip his whip, you hit him, you unequip it, you take your hit, whatever you need to do. You just equip it right before you attack, and then unequip it.
If you have the patience for that play style, it's great.
Exactly. There's weird quirks like that, but yeah, if you don't do stuff like that, a lot of them take so many hits.
Oh yeah,
it's kind of wild.
Also, every boss is basically vulnerable to some sort of affinity, like light, dark, whatever.
Yeah, so you have the variety of glyphs. A lot of them are just generic weapons. Like there's a sword glyph, a mace, a hammer, scythe. And it's kind of annoying because they're not like named weapons anymore. They're just like level 1 sword, level 2 sword, level 3 sword.
It gets very confusing, kind of going through the inventory sometimes.
Yeah, I mean they're not. They have a name. They have each spell has like it's. All the level 1 spells are named X something. X sword, X sword.
It reminds me kind of like Harry Potter.
Yeah, it's okay, but it's just I don't like it as much. But you have so you have all the weapon glyphs, and then you have the spells that are all elementally aligned.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can beat a lot of the bosses purely with spells.
And that's how we did. So like mid to late game, I kind of made the big switch.
Yes.
So, and this is something that like normally I never use the range stuff in a Metroidvania. Yes. In this game, I used like 90% just range stuff later on.
I think it's actually better because you get some of these huge like energy balls you shoot out or homing weapons.
Yeah, it feels pretty cool.
Yeah, it actually, and it's effective. You don't feel like you automatically run out. You get ways that you can recharge your mana quickly or things do more damage.
Yeah, or you just stop moving for a second and it regenerates. Like, it's not that bad.
But... Yeah, the MP is more like a stamina system, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, I really like that. And there's some cool hidden stuff in the game too. If you fight certain bosses, you'll see that they're charging up special attacks.
Yeah.
And these special attacks are in the form of a glyph, and you can actually absorb them while they're charging up.
Yep.
And it's very like a tight timing thing, and you wouldn't notice it maybe just like standardly playing through the first time.
Yep.
But yeah, you can absorb some pretty badass spells from these one-off bosses that carry you throughout the entire game.
Oh, and then we should talk about there's the power attacks and unions, where instead of just using your spells and weapons normally, you can do the power attacks that do more damage and take up more MP, and the unions where you're combining certain items, certain glyphs basically to do bigger nastier
like
attacks.
big bang attacks.
Yeah.
Like you can combine like the best light and the best dark ability to do like a huge screen clearing mega damage move for bosses.
Yeah. I feel like it's a lot easier to play as a pure mage type because the effects are just much flashier and nastier generally than some of the melee combinations.
I feel like it's just more fun.
Yeah.
On some of those bosses.
If you like that playstyle, good for you. It's not my favorite, but it's not a terrible thing. One thing about the glyphs, they keep dropping after you get the first one, but there's no apparent point to getting multiple.
I don't think there is.
Unless you want to trade with someone using the multiplayer system. So that's annoying. Getting the glyphs is more annoying, honestly, than getting item drops, because in some cases you have to kill the enemy and very quickly absorb the glyph before his friends beat you up and interrupt you.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's really hard to get the glyph before it disappears. You don't have very long, and that annoys me. It's kind of like COM's the cards, but worse, because in some cases you don't even know if a certain glyph, where it is, what drops it, if it's useful. You could easily miss a lot of the glyphs without paying, if you're not paying
I
close
probably
attention.
missed like 50% of the glyphs during my playthrough, but
as
long as you get the ones that you like it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it annoys me a little when the core system of the game it's so
Skippable.
skippable, so easy to miss so many things, and so annoying at times. But there's a shop you can find early on, but it sells basically armor and consumables.
Not that good.
It's a little disappointing. So the inventory depends on how many quests you do. So if you don't do enough of the quests, you don't get as much inventory on him. I think there's some things where you get like elemental resistances or things on some of the armor. I forget.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't do a lot of the quests from the NPCs at all. I did a few of them, and it's like, I mean, they're not unfun. It's just like they're easy to do. They're easy to look up. I don't know. I kind of want to just complete it.
Some of them are a little tedious, but some of them have some interesting benefit, some interesting glyphs and things you get from them. There's a lot of secret rooms from breaking walls and things. There's, like I said, it's nice that you can see the completion percentage for each map, so it's a little easier to figure out what you're missing. There's a dowsing hat you can get that indicates if there's a secret in a given room.
I didn't even know that.
That's kind of neat. The enemies are pretty standard for the most part. The bosses are kind of big and huge and whatever.
The boss fights are pretty cool.
They're cool. Like I said, I think some of them are just not that. I like bosses that are difficult. I don't like bosses where they take forever.
It turns into like a bullet hell at some point.
Some of them it's not that they're hard, but that they're hard and you have to be consistently good for a long enough time to beat them.
There's that one boss late game that has he looks like a giant AT-AT from Star Wars or whatever. He's got the big legs that you have to go between for a while. And then you have to jump on his back and hit his head.
Yes.
That boss takes forever.
Yeah, that one was interesting.
Oh my God.
I think I ended up using the throwing axes and mostly hiding between his legs, and I just kept throwing the axes at him and stuff. And there's different ways to do it.
I used the bouncing thunder spell, the one that went back and forth through the screen.
Yeah.
But once you got so many of them on the screen, the Game Boy just halted to a stop. It was pretty funny to watch. But
yeah, so I mean, as far as would I play this game again, I think that's a solid maybe. Like I didn't do
same here.
I didn't do all the optional. I didn't do all the villager quests. I didn't get all the items and glyphs. I didn't really have a desire to 100% this game.
I think just because of the magic system, I would easily play this over the Circle of the Moon.
Yes.
Maybe even over Harmony of Dissonance, honestly, because as far as backtracking goes, there's almost zero.
I feel like I should almost like this game more than I do. I think the glyph thing, like not having built-in weapons, kind of annoys me more than it should.
It's an interesting system, and it's not great, but I do love that spells are a thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It has an Albus mode where you play as the rival character.
That sounds cool. I actually kind of might go back and do that at some point.
It does feel to me like one of the more tedious way as far as the collecting of the glyphs. Like most of the rest of the game isn't that tedious. That part of the game's a little tedious for me. Again, if you want 100% it or whatever.
Oh sure, yeah. I never care about that.
If you don't care about that, it's fine. To me, the switch from weapons to glyphs just feels less fun. Whatever. Like, it's I don't have hunting the sword of poison. I have sword 3.
I kind of like the final boss. Kind of forces you to use glyphs that like
Yes.
you didn't use the entire game.
Yeah.
Like a shield glyph, for example.
Right.
You get it early on, you're like, well, this thing's like useless as hell.
Yeah.
Then you realize on the final bosses that when he's sending like a wave of bats at you, it's
Yeah.
actually the best thing in the game.
Yep.
So I kind of like that. It makes use out of stuff that you normally wouldn't do.
This feels like a very technically excellent game, but maybe not as much of a fun game, if that makes sense.
Correct.
Yeah.
I would play Aria of Sorrow, Dawn of Sorrow over
Yes.
this any day. Symphony of the Night easily.
I give this one a 4-star. I
give it a 4, yeah.
Yeah, I think I prefer it slightly over Circle of the Moon. Maybe not. I think, did I say the other thing before? I kind of go back and forth.
You were comparing this with Circle, and Circle is
Yeah.
one that like I would not go back and play again personally. Like I am so over that game.
I definitely feel like this game is technically better, but I don't know, in some ways I don't enjoy it as much.
I would play this one
Yeah.
over Harmony again as well.
Oh, I like Harmony way better. I like Harmony much better, but yeah.
But as far as like the other ones, like the Aria, Dawn of Sorrow, Symphony of the Night are better, and Portrait of Ruin I haven't played. I mean, I'll take your word on it.
Definitely try that. I mean, that one. If you don't like Harmony, that's fine. But you'll probably like Portrait.
That's the thing. I liked Harmony. I got over it.
Yeah.
The backtracking just takes so long in the game.
Portrait has much less of that problem. I think Portrait has a lot of the improvements that Ecclesia has, but it's a more fun game to me than Ecclesia.
Sure.
It's got more heart. It's got more, the characters are more interesting.
Well, it's like Ecclesia tried to do something different, and then they stopped making Metroidvanias.
Yeah, I think
take that for what you will.
I don't think Ecclesia went over well. Yeah.
No, it's kind of like an obscure game. Like I don't think it sold very well. It's kind of hard to find.
Well, I think you could argue that Metroidvanias were kind of going by the wayside until they had kind of a revival with Steam and with other things.
And now
and the Switch.
Indie developers are trying to bring back the genre, and it's hit or miss.
Yeah,
for the most part, it's not bad. But...
Well, and that's a good I think transition because I wanted to talk about a non-Castlevania Metroidvania, a modern one as an example.
Well, we'll take a couple of them.
Yeah, so the one I wanted to talk about was Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth, Record of Lodoss War on the Switch.
Yeah, and this one I haven't played all through. I've played probably 20 to 25% of it. I'm enjoying it so far, but it's not knocking my socks off by any means.
Yeah, it was developed and published by Team Ladybug and released in 2021 in March. One-player game. It's got some decent, entertaining music. It fits the theme okay, but I mean, it's not... It's not like, I don't think they got a lot of licensed Record of Lodoss War music. It's reminiscent of it. It's not like music straight from the anime or anything.
So Record of Lodoss War, I'm not totally familiar with this. The only thing I have is the original. As far as I know, it's Record of Lodoss War. It's just the set that follows Parn and Diglett or Deedlit.
Deedlit, yes.
Diglett. And I don't know, like it's like a 12 episode series or something.
6, but maybe it's 12.
Yeah, it's not that long. I don't know.
But... That's the original OVA, and then there's a separate OVA that's longer. That's like 12 or 24 episodes. I forget. That follow. It still has those same characters, but it follows the next generation of characters.
So it's a sequel.
Sequel. Yeah, but this is mostly focused on those original characters. And Record of Lodoss War is one of those earlier anime that got kind of big over here, I feel like.
I liked it for what it was, genre. But it's kind of rough around the edges. But
a lot of people, I think, remember it as, it's that D&D themed anime that people in the US are actually familiar with.
Yeah, the wizards look cool. Yeah. Like the kings on each side look pretty badass.
Yeah, it's a little darker than a lot of shows. It's
lots of death and murder.
So the theme fits pretty well here in this game. You play as Deedlit, but there's a lot of cameos from the other characters. You're like trapped in this labyrinth, and it doesn't really explain why. And so I might end up spoiling a few things if you haven't gotten through.
Don't spoil it, brother.
But I'll try not to go into too much detail on that. But it immediately the gameplay feels a lot like Symphony of the Night. Like the controls are precise. You can attack in all 8 directions even, which is neat.
Yep.
With most weapons. With any standard weapon, the sprites and animation have kind of a feeling like Symphony of the Night, but more detailed. The music and visuals are great. You don't switch between zones and music as much as a lot of these games, so that was
Yeah.
unfortunate, but whatever.
I noticed the backgrounds are a little lacking, in my opinion. Like,
Yeah,
a lot of spaces look kind of similar.
There's not a ton of variety in
No.
that. The bosses are huge and well detailed and have a good variety of attacks.
They look really cool.
One of my favorite fights is the fights against Pyrotess, the Dark Elf.
I haven't gotten there yet.
She's pretty
I'm
neat.
sad.
Have you gotten to the trying out the dual elements system yet?
I don't believe so.
So you get these two, was it fire and wind elements based on these two spirits. And so you get fights later in the game where you have to switch. I don't know if you've seen, so are there certain areas where there's like elemental fight, there's like fire that you have to go through and you have to have the fire.
I didn't know that's what you meant, because certain bosses will throw certain colors, certain elements at you, so you can switch between them and avoid them or whatever.
It's kind of like Ikaruga, I think, where you have to switch.
The black and white.
Yeah, there's certain bosses where if you get good at switching, you won't take any damage.
I noticed that halfway through, like, the Leviathan boss.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, this guy's pretty cool, but oh god. Like,
yeah.
And then you got to switch up between, like, your fire and wind or whatever. It was pretty cool. I liked it.
It's a neat effect. So you can to take less damage or no damage, or to more effectively damage certain opponents.
Right, yeah.
You get a bow, which you probably have gotten at this point.
Yeah, several bows.
Yeah, there's a variety, so you can equip you can get better weapons and better bows. Some of the bows do different things, like there's one that shoots out 3 arrows.
Yeah.
That's neat.
It was kind of cool.
Yeah, so
do you ever use those against enemies, or are they just for the puzzles?
You can. Yeah. I mean, it's a little slow to aim and stuff, so I didn't use them much, but you can. If you want range to kill something across the screen,
I like that it has a magic system where you can cast some cool spells. They seem neat.
I like your arrows ricochet off of like certain things like metal and stuff.
Yeah,
it's mostly for puzzles, but you can use it for enemies too.
Yeah.
Like I said, the elemental spirits forces you to kind of switch up your approach a bit, especially to manage your health. So it's got this system where if you take damage, but then you switch, if you have a fully charged spirit, you can go from level 1 to 3.
Yep.
If you take damage, you lose health and you lose some of your spirit power, but you only lose the current equipped one. So if you take some damage, you switch to your other one that's still fully equipped, and you start regenerating health. And which even works in boss fights. If you can avoid a boss and keep one of your things charged, you can regenerate during the fight if you can avoid getting hit.
Yeah, I was slightly confused about how that was working, but
yeah, the general idea that I found to work is in a hard boss, if you can keep at least one of your elemental spirits charged, like if you're going to take a hit, switch to the other one that isn't charged.
Sure.
And then run away from the boss and switch to the charged one so you regenerate until you're ready to fight him again.
Yeah.
So it's kind of neat. It works pretty well. And it's got a merchant, Gint the dwarf, and it's got a gambling system that I didn't use at all from Woodchuck.
I got there and I was looking at it. I'm like, dude, I am
complicated.
Not even gonna look into this.
Yeah, I didn't either. But it's an interesting game. It's got a lot, like a dozen or so weapons and bows, maybe 2 dozen. It's got a decent variety.
I mean, it looked neat. Yeah.
I feel like it's a bit lacking in variety compared to a lot of Metroidvanias. Like, it starts out well, it starts to get a little repetitive near the end, a little overly linear. You do get some upgrades to, like, double jump and,
Yeah, I noticed it doesn't seem like backtracking is going to be a big problem.
Not a lot.
And there's actually, like, one thing I do enjoy, though, they give you a lot of warp rooms.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, like, it's a nice casual playthrough.
It's a more casual game. There's not a ton of stuff to explore and find. It's more of just linear playthrough.
Yeah.
But it's a
I
fun.
Respect that.
It's fun on the way through.
Yeah.
So overall, I give it a 4-star.
Okay.
It feels it's nice to see that other companies are making these games and getting right at that 4-star level, which a lot of these games are.
And most of the games are like $30, so it's not even that bad.
Yeah, this one might have been 20.
Yeah, whatever. I have the physical one on Switch. I don't know what you got. But...
I think I bought it online. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a great game. I enjoyed it. There's just so many of these good Metroidvanias lately. It's like especially on the Switch.
Yeah, the Switch is like a little indie maker heaven right now.
Yeah. There's a few other ones that I've bought recently. The Curse of the Moon 1 and 2. Those are more classic.
Those are the classic ones.
The Bloodstained is the
Ritual of the Night is the Are they making a Ritual of the Night 2? Do you know?
I haven't heard.
Okay.
I wasn't sure. I mean, I assume it did well enough.
Because they made Curse of the Moon 1 and 2. Those are like direct Castlevania 3 style games.
Yeah.
Ritual. I'm getting them all mixed up. Is Ritual of the Night?
I forget.
Ritual of the something or other?
Yeah.
Bloodstained Ritual of the Night.
I think so. I think you're right.
Yeah, that's a major like Symphony of the Night style release.
I need to play through it more.
Yeah, that one I did play all the way through. I will just say you'll probably love it because it is probably the grindiest Metroidvania style game I've ever played.
Yeah, I just need to dedicate time to get into it, and then I'm sure I will love it.
Yeah, you can grind for equipment, you can grind for power-ups, souls, there's recipes like for cooking, which increase your base stats.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you want to min-max your character, you can spend hours upon hours doing that in Ritual of the Night.
Yeah.
The boss fights are all very fun. It's another one of those like kind of big cinematic style boss fights.
Yeah.
They're pretty difficult, but they're not like impossible. It depends again, like if you really start getting into the recipe system where you can build up your stats earlier than later in the game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna save you a lot of headache. Yeah, I don't know. There's all sorts of good monster powers. You just kind of have to play around with them. It reminds me of like a mix between Symphony of the Night and like Aria of Sorrow, where you can really spend a lot of time just building stats. On top of that, too, there's a lot of different platforming mechanics that are not really in any of the other games.
Yeah,
I was telling you earlier, you can do drop kicks on top of candles to bounce on top of other candles.
Yeah.
So like eventually you'll reach to the point where there's like ledges that you see that you can't get to, and you're like, how the hell do you get up here? Did I miss a relic? Did I miss double jump somewhere?
Right.
And the answer is that you're supposed to know that there's a mechanic where you drop kick candles to dive onto other candles, kind of like your Super Mario.
Yeah.
And it gets it's kind of hard to get used to. I'd recommend playing it with like a pro controller for the Switch.
Yeah, I normally would. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you try to play it with like a control stick, it gets very hard to do the candle jumping.
Makes sense.
But other than that, like I thoroughly love the game. It's not super backtracky. Like it's I don't know. There weren't too many annoying elements to me. But there's a lot to figure out. There's a lot to do. I mean, you're never really done doing stuff in that game until you beat it and you just set it down. So, like, I give it a solid 4 to 4.5 stars. Like, I think you should really go through and play it again. And I don't know if they have like a new game plus mode to that game, but I wouldn't mind trying it out if they do.
Yeah. A few other games. You have anything else to say about that one? I should say.
No, it's great. Yeah. Everyone should try it out. I think it's like probably $10 to $15 just on the eStore or whatever. So
yeah, I'll throw my split my thing in there for Axiom Verge 1 and 2. I don't know if you finished both of them.
I did not finish either one of them. Are those more Metroid style games?
They're probably more straight Metroid. There's not as many, but I like to throw them in there because people call them Metroidvania. They're really good. Another more Metroidvania, I think, one is Chasm. That's one that's I bought for pretty cheap. I think I paid like $5 on sale when it came out. And it's from an indie company, I believe. Let's see. I'm trying to remember who came out with that one.
Chasm. Newer or one of the?
I think it came out in 2018.
Okay.
It looks like by Leadman Games is the publisher. And I think you can. I think the full price is $20, but like it's on sale right now, for example, for $6.
Oh sure.
But that's another one of those where you've got kind of a little. You're basically a guy who's defending their hometown from monsters and stuff that are coming up from this mine and wiping it out.
Is it ActRaiser or Metroidvania? What is this?
So basically they send you to this town where this town was wiped out, and you have to go into this mine and rescue the townsfolk and get items. And I think it might have some partially roguelike things, like where the different things are in for different walkthroughs, like different items might be available.
Sure. But
there's different sections that you go to, and you buy different weapons and armor. And like I said, when you rescue people, it opens up parts of the town where you can do different things. Like there's a gambling thing. There's sub weapons. It's very Metroidvania. It feels a lot like a lot of other good Metroidvanias. And I think I got almost all the way through it. I still got to go back and 100% it. But that one is really fun and it's cheap. So
okay.
That's another one.
Worth checking out. What's that out on?
It's out on Switch. I don't know if it's on anything else. I played it on the Switch.
Sweet.
So, yeah. There's a lot of other good ones. People like Hollow Knight. People like, there's so many.
Yeah, Hollow Knight I've never played. I've always heard it's great, but...
Yeah. There's so many of these that I need to try, but there's not enough time.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely going to take a break from Metroidvanias.
Yeah.
We played so much Castlevania here in the last month or two that I'm just...
Yeah.
Like, I love them. And I can appreciate them for everything that they are, but it's like... I don't know if I can stand another Metroidvania right now.
I hear you. So yeah, that's all I had to say about Metroidvanias, I think. You got anything else?
I have nothing. We have taken on a drastic project here with the history of Castlevania. Eventually, we'll have to come back and hit up the 3D games. But,
there's some good ones, but they can be pretty beefy too.
Yeah, like I don't have any of the 360 ones. The PS3, I haven't played any of the PS2. The 64 ones, like I hate those early 3D platformer ones.
Those are gonna be rough.
I played through like half of Castlevania 64. Even it's not even bad. I'm not even shitting on it. It's just I do not like early 3D platformers, so I'm not wanting to dive into those any day soon.
I actually did like the PS2 ones. They were pretty good. Especially Curse of Darkness was pretty good.
Yeah, and I have them. Maybe I don't know. There's always next Halloween, so
yeah.
we'll get around to it. But awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.